Okay,
Okay.
I guess we ready to go?
Yeah, we're ready to go.
Okay, the first item, general business approval of the minutes. People have had a chance, hopefully, to read through those. Any comments or changes proposed by anyone? Hearing none, have a motion to approve and a seconder, please.
Paul, I
Yeah.
had a couple of one little minor comment yesterday that I've emailed to Leon,
Okay.
and he's made the change.
Thank you, Eric.
No problem. But they were, as usual, very good.
Okay, so they're technical more than anything. Is that correct, or?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Motion to approve.
Agreed.
Peter, seconder.
Eric.
Eric, okay, great, thank you. Okay, review of the day's agenda. Chris, do you have some items you want to go through first, and then we'll see if there are any conflicts?
Do you have today's
We
agenda?
only have
there,
two
Leon?
items today, so.
Yeah.
Leon, why don't you do the agenda?
Sure, yeah. So we only have two reviews today. The first one is 60 Trinity, Enbridge, Station A, project that we were just talking about. So they're coming back for their second review, detailed design, and it will likely be their final appearance at the DRP. And then the second project is Lower Yonge Public Realm implementation, coming in for issues identification. This is the first of their 3 reviews with us. It is a public land project. No vote on that project today, and that is all we have.
Yeah, and everyone got the email regarding the photograph, which is not going to take place this afternoon for obvious reasons. So we'll end early. Okay, are there any declarations of conflicts of interest from anyone? No? Okay, thank you. All right. I guess, Chris, report back on the last month's projects.
Okay, so last month we did the West Don Lands Block 10 detailed design. We've sent the consensus comments to the team, and the project received a vote of full support at DD, which means it's finished with the design review process. Unless they make some major changes to the project, in which case we would ask for those to be shared with the panel to see if they felt the need to review it again. But as of now, they are done.
What about the condo component? We really didn't concentrate on that last time.
Yeah, well,
is it coming back?
It's not scheduled to come back. We did talk about it a bit, and either we probably should have talked about it more. I do think the city still has some comments on the condo component, so it is possible there'll be some changes, in which case it might come back with those. So that's the only scenario we'd see it in.
So I mean, I thought last time we were talking about the non-condo components, and our comments were, and the presentation was restricted to that. We did not get an update on the condo component. Are we going to get one, or is it over?
Well, they did show design. They've changed the brick pattern, but I think we were focused on the health center, but I think we were basically signing off on the whole project.
I think that's really unfortunate, because typically for these kinds of buildings, even the next block over, the other projects that Architects Alliance have done, we've actually looked at all of the street-related issues on the side streets, the primary streets, looking at loading bays, entry to parking, all of the relationships of sidewalk to units that are at grade, and that people have had to really present the whole perimeter of the building. And I think that's been really, really important throughout all of the Waterfront Toronto projects.
Yeah, I mean, this project was challenging because it does have so many elements, and there was a certain sense of urgency around the health center. And I think that drove the whole project through the review all at once. There had been suggestions of segmenting it both from actually us and the city, but the proponent really wanted to move ahead with it all at once. So we should figure out how we deal with these sorts of situations in the future, I guess. And if we need, if we need more, then we got to ask for more, I guess. So.
But I feel like it's a double standard relative to even the blocks, to the east of this block. We
I hear you.
just to think about what we discussed, the level of kind of drawings that were produced, and to really think about these side streets as actually having a life. I would have wanted to see sections through the street, understanding what's on the elevation of the east side relative to their contribution on the west side, and how the two work together really as part of the public realm.
Yep.
Yeah, they very glance. It was like two or three image that they had on Cooper Street, and I agree. I mean, that's by far the weakest part of the whole thing. I mean, that my comments last time were focused on that one. I think it's the facade is just not very. I mean, there's no articulation. Yes, there's texture, but that's about it. I mean, it will be the longest single facade, I think, in the entire West Donland, with very little on it.
I think the rendering you have up speaks to the whole issue. We concentrated on which is the right portion of the rendering appropriately, and we did not comment on the dog that's sitting above the heritage buildings there. We should have, but we didn't because we weren't encouraged to. We were held back. So it's not a pretty composition. It's not going to be good.
It may be worth Chris to contact Lorna or just to see if that could come back, because I think it would make the project a lot if we just focus on the condo section, because I think this is like I think we're all a little bit left for we all have stuff to say about that one.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good suggestion. I'll bring it up with Lorna. I'll let her know about our conversation that we had here, and I do think the city was planning to work with them a bit more on some of those condo components. So maybe there's an opportunity then to bring it back. I will try and make that happen.
Good.
Okay, next one.
Yeah. Sorry.
Is the slide change? Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Lakeshore Public Realm East detailed design. This also came last month, and I think they get a vote of full support for the detailed design stage here. There's still some issues around legibility of the innovations, and I think we got some good feedback around that. So I will be working with them, and Pina will be working with them to try to make sure all those suggestions get incorporated in the final documentation that gets issued for construction for this. Okay, next slide, Leon. 178, 180 Queens Quay. I think there's been general support on the massing. Less clear overall on the architecture. This one we had a split vote. We had 9 voted conditional support and 3 voted non-support, I think, based fundamentally on the landscaping. So we're hoping that this will come back for more consideration, at least about the landscape, if not the whole project. This is a stream 1, though, so it would ordinarily only come twice, and it's come twice. So we'll see if city staff will be willing to get them to come back a 3rd time. So I'll add that one to my list to talk to Lorna about. Okay, next slide. And the Portland's flood protection bridges. The first bridge is here. You've probably seen it. This is it arriving on its barge coming in. We had some nice media around this. Waterfront Toronto staff tweeting it out, and some other media coverage. It's too bad of COVID. It would have been great to have had a sort of arrival party down here, but there are still 3 more coming, so we may get to do that yet. If you just go to the next slide, the bridge has now been installed, and it's crossing the channel, and I think it's pretty stunning. I think you went too far, Leon.
Go back one, Leo.
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
This is just stunning,
Yeah.
just marvelous.
It's really beautiful, and congrats to Waterfront Toronto.
Yep.
Your media coverage has been so good. It's just been everywhere, and it's all been incredibly exciting.
Yeah, this
and
thing's pretty hard to miss on the landscape now.
Hmm.
virtually everyone that I've talked to just is ecstatic about it. So I just wonder, Chris, do we know yet when the other bridges are scheduled to, arrive throughout the coming year and beyond?
I don't know. I'm sure someone does. I can find out and report back.
Yeah, obviously some of them, I think, or well, at least one of them, hopefully will be arriving next summer. So maybe if
Yeah.
COVID is over, we can all be down there.
Yep.
On your boat, Paul.
Yeah,
On your boat, yeah.
yeah, we'll give it a salute.
Maybe your boat could even fit under there. I don't know.
No, I don't think so.
No, okay.
Anyway, yeah, that would be nice to know if we can schedule something.
Yeah, well, maybe we can all get out there for a group photo in the summer on one of the bridges or something, or on a boat with that behind us.
That'd be great.
On Paul's boat with a cocktail. Okay,
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's right. Long as Peter brings the supplies.
no problem.
All right,
All right.
next slide, Leon. Stormwater management facility. So it's looking great. It was sandblasted and then anti-graffiti coated, and then Pat, I guess we sandblasted off the anti-graffiti paint. Is that what happened?
Yes, we still haven't sorted that out 100%.
What you're going to do with that, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I guess we're estimating completion by March 31st.
Yeah.
And some of the landscaping's going in now. On the photo on the right, you can see the water channel that connects
Yeah.
the building to the storm shaft.
A couple of boo-boos here and there, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the panel. Any movement
Yeah.
on the panel box? Are we?
I'm waiting for a price on that. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Good. Great. Well, it's still awesome, whether there's boo-boos or not. Thing looks amazing.
Okay.
Next slide, please. And here's right now the tentative agenda for December, and I think we're down to 3 items. I think one just got pulled. So, destination play, 11 Bay, which is the little conference center building right across the street from our office, and 1 to 7 Yonge, which is the Pinnacle project, phases 4 and 5 coming in for schematic design.
Okay.
I think that's it for me. Oh, and then Leon has an item.
Yes, I wanted to just take a couple of minutes, if we can, at the end of the public session here, to just show you an update on the DRP handbook covers. So we spoke about these 2 months ago, and these are some of the comments that I received. Things to consider. So we took another stab at it, and it's still mock-ups at the moment. I'll show you a couple of options. So we're really trying to find a direction that we like, and that we can confidently give over to the graphic designer to keep working. So the text, the logo, stuff you see there are very much just placeholders, but we're particularly interested in the image selection, and the number of images, or whether it just sets the tone of what we were talking about a little bit better. So I have a couple of options here, starting with 5 images that try to really balance the message of landscape, public realm, and building, and with a focus and emphasis on putting people really sort of at the center of it. And then options where we're just playing with the number of images. So the previous ones were more focused on the individual quality of the image. These are more about just the sheer body of work that we as a panel look at. So I'm wondering if I can get your thoughts on these. If these are a little bit closer, a little bit warmer, to
Can you
we're
toggle
looking for.
backwards and forwards?
Yeah.
Well, this is George Leon. I vote for the smallest number of the largest images. Which I think means the first. I prefer the first one over all the others, and I think it's in terms of the range of projects. I mean, I know you always want more images to be more representative, but I think it's representative enough, and it's less busy, and you can actually read the images more clearly. So I argue for. Well, not more than 5, which is what you've got there.
Right.
I agree, George.
Fadi here, if I could jump in real quick. I'm of the mind of keeping maybe the main cover pretty pretty minimal, then having maybe the first image once you open the cover page as a secondary title cover with some of the images of projects. So it keeps it kind of nice and sleek and clean. And also at the same time, you know, because there's a ton of projects also in the pipeline, there's way to be like a little bit less self-referential and more kind of within the branding overall of Waterfront Design Review. So kind of those really beautiful illustrations of the report, the annual report, for example, that has these really beautiful, very minimal, sleek graphics that's of the overall identity of Waterfront Toronto. But then you could easily open the first page after this one and see an image collage kind of like this of key projects that demonstrate design excellence. But I personally, just from pure personal taste, I love the kind of minimal aesthetic of the other reports. So maybe something in that family, and then photographs come in as kind of these amazing splash pages across the document that show some of the design excellence within it. But that's taste.
Thanks, Fadi.
I agree. I would agree with that.
I would agree with that. I just want. I find the sequencing of the words very confusing here. I think it's got to be, you know, if it's the design review handbook, it should read very readily and apparently as the design review handbook. I don't think it needs to have the kind of collage aesthetic for the typeface and its location on the page.
Thanks, Jenna. Yeah, we'll pass that back to the graphic designer.
So maybe Leon, you can, it's great feedback, and just maybe take another crack at perhaps the typeface and a simpler, more powerful one image or two on the cover. But I think it's headed in the right direction. Leading with landscape has got to be a strong message that comes out, I think, when people pick this up.
I like the idea of the collage on the inside cover, so when you open the book, you see the photos. I think that's an interesting suggestion.
Yep.
And having more of an abstract, a more minimal
graphic-based
cover.
Yeah.
I like that. I like Fadi's. I think that's very sensitive.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so maybe you could come back with something for us for the December meeting, and it'd be nice to kind of put this to bed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We're working on that. Yep.
Okay. All right. Just under Chair's remarks, there's only 2 small things for information I wanted to share with people. Some of you know the Waterfront BIA has recently received approval to expand all the way east over to Cherry Street. So it'll now cover the area from Bathurst Street all the way to Cherry. So think of it as silos to silos. And I think that's positive and important for the evolution of Queens Quay east of Yonge as it starts to fill in. Just related to that, the executive director of that BIA, Tim Coker, who often comes to our meetings when we met in person, noticed a whole random series of the granite pavers have started to tilt, and they're uneven and have been patched up with, I think, asphalt, if I'm not mistaken. But he wondered about, you know, what the strategy is to repair that. Right now, they're kind of a trip hazard, and obviously, it's something we got to attend to. That's the last thing we need is these granite pavers looking, haphazard. So I just wanted to raise that. I'm not sure if that's already in the works to get addressed or not.
Yeah,
Chris.
that is in the works. So we have a maintenance fund that was set up as part of the street to deal with just that. We've already done a couple of rounds of minor repairs, and we have another round to do. So we're actually we've walked the street, and we're walking it again with them, and we're going to choose the priority areas that need the work and issue a work package to get that out there and taken care of. So we're very aware of it, and we are on it.
Good. Okay. Okay, I think we're ready to, it's just 9:30 to go to the first item, 60 Trinity Street, which is here for detailed design. And I believe Leon is going to introduce it.
Yes, thank you, Paul. Let me just bring up the slideshow here. All right. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the design review for 60 Trinity, Enbridge Station A. This is the project's second review at the Waterfront DRP. They're here today for detailed design. I would like to first start by acknowledging the proponent team. We have Mohammed Suleiman, Senior Advisor, Construction and Project Management with Enbridge. We have Aaron Murdoch, Supervisor of Capital Development, Enbridge. And we also have Stephen Lefneski, Manager with Walter Fetty Architect here with us today.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
So I will go through these, introduction slides rather quickly because most of this information is exactly the same as when we first saw the project in July. But just as a quick reminder, this is an Enbridge pressure regulation station building located at 60 Trinity. The site is just north of the distillery district. It was recommended by the city to come to the DRP, and we're very thankful for the city for bringing this project to the DRP. We also appreciate Enbridge, for bringing a level of design beyond typical station building and also agreeing to return to address changes. And a reminder that this is a pending, panel approval. This is the project's final DRP. The station is a secured facility with very limited above-grade features, as an open-air decorative masonry security barrier. And the team will be applying for minor zoning variance, and also we're starting permit after the DRP. So once again, the site is located north of the intersection of Mill Street and Trinity. There is a future local streets A and B, just south of the site. The site is located adjacent to many existing and future developments across from Block 347. The future Block 2 is just west of the site. It's also adjacent to the historic 50 Mill and Rack House D at 60 Mill. This is the current condition of the site. The team came to DRP in July to present a hybrid schematic design and issues ID presentation. Today, they're here to address some specific panel comments and discuss some additional details. And these are the consensus comments from last time. It is important to reference the design of the adjacent development, blocks 347 with regards to street frontage, facade materiality, and landscape context. Waterfront Toronto to share the documentation with the proponent that has been done. The site is located next to, the most historic district of Toronto. It's very important for the project to fit into both existing and future contexts. There are precedents of highly contextual hydro facilities, so carefully consider how this project can evolve the typology to respond to the site. It's important to set a precedent for a well-integrated contextual public infrastructure facility building in the West Don Lands. For the building itself, consider the visual impact of the building and site as viewed from high up. and also consider revisiting the design of the roof structure to accommodate a green roof. For the perimeter wall, the panel was not supportive of the use of barbed wire and chain link fence. Consider alternative strategies. It was recommended to utilize a real brick finish and not painted precast, and also consider other animation strategies at the perimeter wall. Also consider the visual identity and signage use. For the landscape, consider planting trees in the corner to improve street level and aerial presence. The panel voted for non-support for this project last time. So today we would like to ask the panel to consider, does the revised brick exterior adequately address the context of West Don Lands and the Distillery District? Do the revised perimeter details adequately balance the need for site security while supporting, Waterfront Toronto's objectives of design excellence? Does the updated design improve the visual impact of the building as viewed from high up? And finally, is there sufficient lighting around the site so pedestrians would feel safe and secure at night? Thank you. I would now like to introduce Mohammed from Enbridge to continue the design presentation. Hello, Mohammed.
Good morning. Thanks, Leon. Can you hear me clearly before I?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here.
Great.
And thanks again for inviting us, and it's having the great opportunity here. My name is Mohammed Salman, and I'm a senior advisor with the engineering construction here with Enbridge. I'll be the project manager looking after the construction for this project. I've taken over from Mike Abate, who was here back in July. Some of the panel member might have been familiar with him. That's the reason for the change of faces here. Mike has moved on, and I've taken on this project on from him. I'm going to start with a quick introduction that might be redundant, so I will go fairly quickly over the first few slides just to save everyone's time. So I'm going to go on to the following slide here that talks about the project description and the background. If you can see where my cursor is, that's where we've been approached by Waterfront Toronto to remove a part of the NPS 20, that's a 20-inch pipeline, to facilitate widening of the Don mouth naturalization project. And as a result, we have to we had to relocate our existing pipeline, as well as build a new pressure regulation station located at 60 Trinity Street. That's where my cursor is. So the need for the station is to provide an alternative connection to the two systems operating at different pressures that had previously been connected through this blue line at the south here. So like I mentioned, the need for the project is to facilitate the Waterfront Toronto project at the Don mouth. I'll move on quickly to the following slide again. This talks about the existing location where Leon had described. I'm not going to highlight anything else other than the fact that we've owned the site. We had since the late 1800s, we had a building there at some point, was recently demolished, and the site current conditions were highlighted in Leon's slide. So I'll move on to the following one, and another picture showing the context. It's a pretty old picture here. And I'll move on to the following slide, again, similar to what we had discussed in previous presentation. Just to highlight the key design requirement when we considered designing this facility. We had 5 key elements to consider. The top ones are functionality and safety, as well as site security, given the proximity to high density areas. We needed to ensure that the site does not generate noise, given the high profile and, like I said, the density of the area, and as well as it being aesthetically pleasing and reduced lighting. That's something that we will elaborate on. But I'll go on to the following slide, which talks kind of in relatively detail what we had considered additionally with regard to each of those areas. In terms of functionality, we kind of ensured that the site only included elements that are only necessary to the station function. It's something that we cannot compromise on. Make sure that the station operation and the safety is not compromised at all. And in terms of site security, we have this 5.1 meter tall open air decorative brick wall as a security barrier. It also has a see-through features to accommodate the decorative and the fitting into the site as well. We're also going to have an integrated site security system. So this is going to be connected to our real estate security system. In terms of noise prevention, we've actually, I'd say this is a precedent that we're setting for this type of stations. We're also moved a lot of what could have been an above grade facilities into below grade. So these are the pressure regulating equipment that could have continuously produced humming and not noises that wouldn't have been acceptable in a site like this. We've on top of all of that, we've also included a building that would be covering all of the facilities. In terms of the aesthetically agreeable side, we've also, like I said, we've not only moved the typical above grade facilities below grade, we limited anything that even if it's not noise induces, we limited all above grade features and moved it inside that building and made that building one consolidated structure as opposed to separate scattered building, which you would see what we would have on a typical similar stations. And we've worked with our architect, who was also on the call today, to make sure we are fitting in the character, the history, and the future, the planned future developments in this area. And we'll cover those in details in future slides. And in terms of reduced lighting, that's kind of talking about the internal compound and trying to try a little bit of low-key, which that's kind of our typical approach, but we'll show you what we've done so far. The following slide just talk about what does the previous slide mean in terms of equipment. In order for us to build the pressure regulator station of that size, what we need: pressure regulating equipment, we need heating equipment, we need filtration equipment, as well as control valving and all these equipment. And that essentially translates into what we can see here. That black bold line represents where the perimeter wall is going to be. That's the boundaries of the site. What you also can see here is the below grade facilities that are being installed. So there are several pipelines that will be entering and leaving the facility. There are several equipment that are housed within the building. There are going to be compartmentalized within the same building, although it's one structure, just because of the different equipment, there's going to be several compartment with this building. We're also going to have a backup generator. So just to give you an idea of what may not be visible from above grade, the site is also going to be unmanned. There's not going to be ongoing personnel presence to continuously maintain it. There's going to be certainly going back for future preventative and regular maintenance, but on a typical day, the site is unattended. There's no personnel dealing with it. Like I said, you can see the relative congestion below grade in areas that we may not be able to see it looking from above. So that's give you an idea of what those 5 key considerations translate into what we have and what we expect to see in reality. So I'll go on the following slides to to try to explain the dialogue that we've been having with what we understand the DRP's requirement to be for this project. And we understand that you are looking for us, that you've been looking for us to consider the context, the interface with future development sites, secure parameters, street design, as well as lighting. And I think for the most part that like we've been able to have a good conversation on those and how to address. And I think the comments that we received back in July have immensely helped us to continue this dialogue with our and this, I'm not gonna cover this. I know Leon just covered it in details in his presentation, but just emphasizing our awareness of what the DRP is looking for this project site. So I mean, these slides might be again similar for the most part to what we've presented. Just again reiterating what our architect have considered in coming up with the proposed design. We've gone out to see what the cellular district, the most historic site in Toronto, and looks like, and how we could fit in, and the character, the history, the context, and everything like mentioned before. And this one talks about specifically about adjacent structures and what the major elements look like. And on the following slide specifically talked about the presence of the periodic brick walls, which is what we've tried to adopt for our perimeter wall. And the following one specifically talks about how the modern and historic integration have been integrated in existing sites, and something that we've also taken into account in coming up with a proposed solution and in addressing some of the comments that we received back in July. The following one talks specifically to lighting fixtures, examples of what exists today in the Cellular District, whether it's historic components or some of the newer developments and stores in the area. So is the case with doors as well. We know we're going to have several entrance to both through the wall as well as the building, and we did consider what could fit in terms of color, in terms of design, in terms of character, to ensure our facility fits in and does not stand out in a different fashion. This is certainly going to be a little different from what we're going to what we typically build, which I'm going to cover later on. I have it in the appendix, but just to go on to the following slide here. This is the site that's being referenced in the previous meeting with the DRP, and it's something that we looked at and see what's being done there. And I think if there are any questions, certainly Stephen, our architect from Waterfront, is available to comment on some of these questions that specifically to what was considered during the architect design. So I'm going to move on. The slides essentially captures our current design. It referenced our proposed current design. It also referenced the feedback that we received back in July. I know Leon listed it, and I tried to have like a one slide with all the comments. So the comments that we received mostly revolved around three elements. One was the perimeter wall, the second one was around the building, and one around landscape. And like Leon mentioned, for the perimeter wall, I'm going to stick with number one here. We've gone back, we've taken the comments. We agreed that the use of real brick is going to be of essential value here. It's important that not just the looks, but the feel and everything for the perimeter wall to match and to fit in the history. So we're going to be using real brick. We're no longer going to be using barbed wire and trying to make the site less intimidating to neighbors and residents and as well as visitors. We're not going to be using this. We're going to be using wrought iron bars, which are going to look more decorative, and I have a little bit more details on the future slide. We've incorporated some of the lighting, and you can see it on both inside and outside of on the perimeter wall, and future slides will show these details as well. We've also taken the additional steps to highlight the 3D elements on the perimeter wall as well. And like I said, we'll show this in detail on future on coming slide. As far as the building, I know we've received that comment of trying to incorporate a green roof, which really posed a real challenge, given that by enveloping all these facilities into one building, although we have doors in and out to access the equipment, our plan was to have a removable roof to facilitate major future maintenance. So we were not able to accommodate the green roof, but we didn't want to give up on the idea. We thought a green moss roof might be an acceptable alternative, and we're still in conversation with our supplier for the building to see what we can do to accommodate the moss roof. Only this week, I was advised that they're only able to accommodate 2/3 of that roof to be green moss. So this wasn't available. This information wasn't available at the time when the slides were provided to Leon. So we're still trying to see what we can do for the green moss, but in order to accommodate the removability of certain parts of the roof, I think we can only accommodate 2/3 of the roof. So I don't know if the appearance is going to be as attractive, but it's certainly something we're still trying to see what we can do to accommodate. The other thing for the building, we have still trying to see what we can do to make the appearance and the exterior finish for the building fit in. We're still, well, the plan is still to go with precast concrete with the appearance of stained brick, and this is again, and trying to make it more fitting, although it's not for the building itself, not going to be a real brick. We're still working with our supplier towards a bespoke solution that's not off the shelf, that standard solution. So with that, I do have some exterior finishing and samples to share with the DRP. Perhaps you can get some feedback on what might look more fitting and deciding between these finishes for the building itself. But I think that's the one thing I have for the building. And in terms of landscape, I think we've also received some comments with regard to bring some planting to this area. And I think the previous slide that I showed, which demonstrates the existing facilities, the below grade pipelines as present in the site, and I think it illustrates well how congested this site is going to be, and whether and the areas that may not necessarily have the building footprint is not necessarily free for landscape purposes. It's either going to be driving space or workspace, or either going to be pose a challenge if trees, roots, which really we don't plant trees around where pipelines are. You can understand the limitations of for the use for this yard. So that's I just want to highlight that. Although we're trying to see what we can do to accommodate living the green roof and planting, it's something that we're unable to accommodate here, like I mentioned, because of the presence of below grade facilities and conflict with potential conflict between the root system and the pipeline, which is something that we've never consider. It could pose serious challenges to any future maintenance. So with that, I'll move on to what we're considering to be a sustainability feature for the site. The site itself is going to be filled using permeable granular. So and we're going to be working with the city clearly on drainage, and so the site is not going to pose any issues on that front. I mentioned the green roof moss being considered considered. So if that's not an option, we're looking at possibly, it was a suggestion that was made to us to use metal roof, and I think that's quite feasible. But like I said, it's something that's in development right now. We're still trying to see if that green moss is feasible. If not, we'll consider whether the precast, our default option, or the metal roof. Given that the metal roof may have a lower embedded carbon, which would increase the green sustainability of the site. We're also committing to sourcing local material, whether it's for real brick when we're working or other building material. So that's something that we've also committing to. And like you mentioned, future slides will demonstrate additional details. So with that, I'm going to go on to the following one. This one demonstrates how the site will look like at night. And you can see where the lighting elements that we've incorporated will look, and we'll be waiting. We'll certainly open for comments to see if that exterior light also is adequate in the DRP's view or not. And I'm going to go to the other slide here, where you can see the 3D elements that we've incorporated in the brick wall, the gaps or the see-through, and I think it's going to be both aesthetically pleasing for people to be able to see through for the site, as well as it addresses our own safety and security standards, where staff needs to be able to see if they're walking into a hazard or not. So I think we've tried to certainly to accommodate and have that conversation between our design requirement as well as the DRP's considerations. We're still working throughout the details for the wrought iron, so these are also examples of what it may look like, and trying to incorporate it into the design. And I'll move on to the following slide here, which essentially the same views at night to demonstrate what it would look like with the lighting fixtures and so on. Going back to the exterior finish for the building. So the building will be inside the complex. It's not going to be as easily visible, but we thought it's important for it to be as fitting. So we have 3 samples from left to right. Those, let's call them sample 1, 2, 3. And I've taken them personally and laid them against existing structures in the distillery district. This one is the distillery district wall, and you can see how the different sample fit in to different extent. These are going to have final coating applied, so they may look slightly darker in the final product, but like I said, we're not going for this project. I don't think there's any aspect where we've grabbed the solution out of the shelf and this is an example of one of them, and it's also just explains why we don't have that final product yet, because it is in development. But yeah, those are the samples that we're working with. The following slide is the same sample just against the 60 Mill Street. This is the adjacent building the building adjacent to our station site. And the following slide, and like I said, we would like to hear what the DRP thinks between these 3 samples. These are only going to be used for the building, not for the exterior wall, which will be a real brick, small brick, to be more fitting in the distillery district in this area. So with this, I'm just going to just talk about the timelines. We're hoping that if we get a favorable decision from the DRP with the items that we've addressed, we'll be able to move ahead with applying for permits with the City of Toronto, so that we're able to construct into possibly second quarter of 2021, and get the station in service to accommodate the original request and timelines from Waterfront Toronto. So we're certainly open for feedback and comments, but we're also hoping that by addressing most of the comments that we've received, that we can get a favorable solution here. And with that, I think this should conclude my presentation, Leon. But before I do so, if I can have a couple minutes before we get into the question to show a couple more renderings that I have in the appendix. This one here shows what we envision to be what the green moss roof would have looked like. Like I said, we just recently, only this week, received an update that we're not able to make that design fully removable like we had asked them. So they're only able to do 2/3 of the roof space in that look. So I'm not sure if that's going to be quite appealing. So it's looking more like we're probably going to be steering away from it, although just because of that 2/3 component that could be only used for green roof. The second slide here, another alternative if we opt to the metal removable roof, which also is an option. And the following just shows a typical station layout, a station of the same size, components, and purpose. What it would have done, how it would have ended looking like with the 5 design considerations being functionality, security, safety, and so on and so forth. This is what other station would have looked like, and I think it demonstrates how far our team, with the help with the comments from the DRP, have departure, how much departure we've had from the current or an existing design, and to make sure that we're fitting in the character and the history of the Surrey district. So that's another example of what it would look like, with components above grade, with insulation applies, with jersey barriers, with fencing inside. Every separate components would have their own separate structures and buildings. It's not something that anyone would have liked, would have even proposed to have in an area of such historic and heritage value, but it just to demonstrate the how responsive our team has been with the help from comments that we received from the DRP since July. With this, Leon, I think I'll give it back to see if there's points for discussions or questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. It's Paul. Thank you very much for your presentation. Those last slides certainly illustrate quite a contrast. So we're going to open it up for questions. And since we're dealing with a building, I think I'll still follow with the architects first. So Betsy, do you want to kick it off? Do you have any questions?
No question.
No?
No questions, Paul.
Okay, George?
Yes, I have 2 questions. And the first one's actually not for Mohammed, but for Chris. I'm just wondering, what does the streetscape proposal to come for these streets include any street trees?
That is a good question. I am not sure that that we've seen those. We're not designing the streets right there, I don't believe. So we'd have to go and see if there is a streetscape plan at the city. Deanne, I don't know if you know.
Hi there, it's Deanne. We are using a street cross section that's the same for block 347. So it is a typical, we call it dip stamp but it's somewhat modified, and then this would continue on as it crosses Trinity Street and comes around. So we've secured the right of way, and we would want to continue the same street cross section that we're using in that same east-west street between blocks 3, 4, and 7. So that is what we're planning at the moment, and it includes street trees on the north side.
So there would be some street trees around the perimeter, at least on one side of the perimeter of this site. Is that correct?
That's the plan, George, right now, is to have them on the new east-west street.
Right. Thank you. And my second question is for Mohammed. The wrought iron top to the brick perimeter wall, is that purely aesthetic, or is it performing any security function over and above what the wall does?
Yeah, that would be the intent as well. I think it's trying to make it more decorative and more and appealing, as opposed to the barbed wire fence, but it also does serve a purpose of preventing anyone from being able to enter the compound if they don't have access to it.
Okay. Those are my questions, Paul.
All right, let's go to Peter.
Yeah, just one question, and it has to do with the green roof. I'm taking your expression of the green roof as a moss roof to be, just incorrect in that moss is not going to survive. I assume it's going to be some kind of sedum roof, and I'll leave that to my landscape colleagues to comment on. But I just want to clarify what you've said. You've said that we can't do the whole thing, but we can do 2/3, and we're committed to doing 2/3. Is that correct?
What was communicated to me, that we're not able to, that our supplier is not able to make the green moss roof as we had requested, as well as making it removable at the same time. In order to accommodate a removable feature, they can only do 2/3, so that the third is the removable piece.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, let's see, Jana, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mohammed. I just have one question. How often in the life of one of these facilities do you anticipate having to swap out equipment?
I mean, it depends. There are different types of equipment. So the below grade equipment, for instance, I don't think we anticipate to go back for another 10 years, possibly. In order to change some of the components, some of the above grade components, for instance, might have a slightly more frequent time frame. So in terms of the filter that I mentioned, as well as the heater, those could be annual, could be 5 years. So that sort of range, depending on and something that in order to go and replace those below grade equipment, that's where the roof part would have to be removed, because we're talking about essentially making it a construction site by removing the roof, having equipment access it from up top, as opposed to the regular maintenance that would be taking place to those above grade equipment housed within the building itself. If that answers your question.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Bridget, please.
Yeah, just to clarify, Mohammed, I appreciate the photos of the brick against the existing brick walls of the distillery, but I'm just trying to understand, those were for the building and they were not for the brick perimeter wall, right? And that what I understood, if I got that correctly, is that the brick perimeter wall, you're proposing a precast brick. and that there are no samples of that that you were able to provide to us.
So I'm just going to confirm the samples that I provided are for precast concrete with a stained brick look, only for the building. For the perimeter wall is going to be real brick.
It will be a real brick.
Real
okay.
brick.
And,
yeah.
And did you have any samples of that real brick? And what I saw was like a pattern that had openings in it.
Yes.
From the visuals.
Yes.
So I guess my question is whether you have photos of the real brick that is the outer sort of boundary wall of the facility.
Yeah, I don't have samples for that brick yet, and I thought I would provide only samples for the precast building, for the precast exterior for the building, just because it's a solution that we're developing. For the real brick, it's going to, unless we receive specific requests, it would be what's available at the time of procurement. And I know it was mentioned to us that we should be using smaller size brick to fit more into the area.
Okay, and then just one other question of clarification. From your diagram, your kind of aerial view, there's still a portion along the west side of the property where the brick stops, and it's another treatment just in the northwest portion. And I know this was brought up at our previous meeting, but could you just clarify for me why you have this gap, or what's the purpose of the gap from a Enbridge perspective?
So I'm just going to share my screen. So I understand this is the area you're referring to?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so this is going to be our rear construction entrance. So we have the main gate on Trinity that's going to be, I'd say that's everyone's entrance. On the west side, where we have the sliding gate, it's relatively large, and it's just going to be a sliding gate, and at the end it's going to be a partially swing gate just because of the length of it. Does this answer your question?
And the purpose of that is for, like, why is it, like, what's its purpose relative to your front gate, or the main, what you're considering more your main gate?
So that rear gate would be the entrance used by larger vehicles and to the site.
And then because of the lower height, does that end up with like barbed wire on it or something, given your safety issues?
Yeah, so sorry to interrupt. No, we're not going to be installing barbed wires at all. And this gate will match the height of the wall.
So what we're seeing here, it looks lower, but in reality, it would actually be to the top of what you're saying is the brick wall.
Yeah, it will match, the top will match the height of the wall, and it will not look like this. And there's no, like I said, I just want to confirm barbed wire is not going to be applied at all at this site.
Okay, thank you very much. It's really helpful.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, thank you. Pat?
Yeah, I think you answered this, but just to confirm, so the brick samples that were shown up against the wall, those are samples or mock-ups for you to generate a precast wall panel from?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Okay, so the images that you had of the different brick samples with mortar joints, those are samples that represent what the precast wall panel will look like.
Yes, those are concrete with stained brick look that is only going to be used for the building
okay,
itself.
I just wanted to confirm that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah,
no problem.
Okay, thanks, Pat. Okay, Fadi.
I just have a really quick question. So the space between the actual perimeter wall and the building itself, is that crushed gravel or one big sort of concrete pad, or what's the idea? Like the perimeter around the building, what's the surface material?
Yeah, that's all going to be gravel.
Gravel, so it's completely permeable. There's no.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Eric?
Yeah, a couple of questions. And this may be more for the city. You mentioned that the east-west street would have street trees. What about Trinity Street? Is Trinity envisioned to have street trees as well along that along the curbside of adjacent to the facility? Maybe that's more for Deanne.
Hi, Eric. At this moment, we don't anticipate a change in Trinity Street, so we don't have a new cross section for there, and it's quite tight. So I'm not sure we're going to be able to get the trees on Trinity Street.
Okay. Yeah, I was asking the question simply because of the based on the diagram that Mohammed you showed, they're the pipes that goes under. So my question, I guess, is these pipes are going to run in various parts of the city. Do they interfere with trees? Can you put trees on top? Or I don't know exactly where they falls within the right of way. Are they an impediment to landscaping in some key areas over, and I'm assuming over the entire length?
I agree. That's a good question. So I would say if we are installing a new pipeline within the city's public right-of-way, we would install away from trees.
Mm-hmm.
If our pipeline is in existence and it is within the city's pipeline, within the city's public right-of-way, we have no control over what the city wants to decide. So these are facts that we have no control over versus when we come to planning a project.
Mm-hmm.
If we're installing a pipeline on our own facilities, knowing the issues,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that this is a station site, not just a pipeline site, there is more likely that we might be going back for excavation, whether for expansion or for replacement or a maintenance. Yeah, with a pipeline, it's a much longer distance. You can't control the probability and likelihood. On a station site, the likelihood of us going back to dig is higher. So why create our own maintenance issue? Over the years, the tree root does conflict with the pipelines. It meshes with it, it grows along it. So yeah, so I think that would be my kind of thought, unless Aaron perhaps have other to add.
Sorry, it was a little bit frozen there when I was trying to unclick the mute button. But no, I think Mohammed, you summarized that pretty well. At the same time, too, anytime you're doing any tree planting, if we have an existing pipeline in the way, is you do need to order locates in order to dig those trees and plant them, and you would recognize that there's a gas pipeline right there. And so depending on whether or not it's a vital main or not, would have different restrictions on where we can plant trees. We do have a third-party requirements manual digging in the vicinity of our natural gas infrastructure that does clearly outline the root ball of the tree and what we require a distance from our existing infrastructure to be. But yeah, obviously we work closely with the City of Toronto whenever we choose a route selection for our new pipelines to make sure that we minimize any current and future conflicts as much as possible.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, a little question.
Sorry, Aaron.
Yeah, I have two small question. You talk about 2/3 of the roof of the potentially with a CDM roof. Is it? I'm assuming it would be. You need an area. Do you know how that would be distributed? Is it just like on one of the side of the slope? You pretty much needs to keep like just kind of trying to understand where and how that would work.
Yeah, so my understanding from our design folks, I'm just going to share my screen again for a second before getting into the details here. So I'm just going to jump between this slide and
Perfect.
and this slide back here where we have the equipment. So if you can visualize where the roof is, I would say that this side, that's the kind of the western part of the building is where we anticipate the removal of the roof would be needed to facilitate the future replacement of those below grade facilities.
So it would be if you had a north-south division, you cut it in third. Let's say the western third is probably a place where you wouldn't be able to accommodate the cedar room.
Yeah, so we've, like I said, we've been working to try and avoid this. So all these doors and on all the sides of the building would facilitate whatever maintenance that would be needed. On this side, on the north side, we even have a garage size door that would both be aesthetically pleasing and at the same time be functional for us to get in whatever equipment to do replacement to both the filter and the heater. On the west side, that's where the major undertaking will be taking place in the future when we go and replace the below grade regulators. The roof would have to be removed, the cranes would have to be present, excavation will have to take place, and that's in big part why 1/3 of that would not be green roof.
Okay. And my last very quick question is just seeing the gate at the back on the west side, is it, I'm assuming there's some kind of laneway or something maybe as part of the block, or is it is it through a laneway, or is that wall like slightly inside your property, or just trying to understand how in the future when the car dealership develop, is it through their property, or just trying to understand.
Yeah, looking here, there's going to be a lane for sure. I'm just not sure if I have the answer to whether we have an easement per se, or whether we own the part where the wall is going to be. I'll defer this to Aaron if he have any additional information, if that's okay.
Yeah, there will be a lane. So we'll end up kind of having access through a roadway or a laneway all around that entire structure. So there will be a future lane that is constructed around both sides. It will not be Enbridge owned. So whenever we do need to utilize that as workspaces, we will need to require temporary workspace agreements to do that.
Okay, so and that would be, so is it located on your property or on the neighbors? And you'll have to have some kind of agreement.
For the actual laneway that's being proposed?
Yeah.
I believe it's actually to accommodate some City of Toronto, a new lane that way. Is it? I'm not sure, but I thought it was a public lane that was going to be created, not necessarily a private lane. I'm not entirely positive though.
I mean, this is George. It shows up on the planning drawings at the beginning of the presentation as a street.
Yeah, that's what I understood it to be, as a future street that I believe was public.
Right.
So I think if you go down a slide.
Well, it was in Leon's present.
Okay, I see it's on the block plan on page 6. It looks like there is some space. I don't know, maybe Deanne, maybe you know the answer.
It's planned as an 18.5 meter right of way. Eric?
No, we're talking, sorry, about the west side and the north side of the facility. It's just not quite clear on the West Donland block plan or on the drawings. Just
Hi, this is Megan from City Planning. We've been primarily concerned with securing the new east-west street that's located directly south of the site. Part of those lands are even being acquired from Enbridge in order to build the street. We hadn't been focused on those easements or access points onto the site itself.
Okay, no, just okay. No, it's not quite clear at this point, but I think that's something to probably for the Enbridge to and the city to because if there's a space there, what's the character? What's the space? What's the safety of it? That's why I bring it up. Thank you.
You okay, Eric?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. I have Jeff and Kevin left. So Jeff.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you know, in addition to the green roof conversation, was there any discussion about renewable solar or anything like that?
I'm sorry, I don't think I heard the question.
No. Can you repeat it, Jeff?
Yeah, I was just wondering if for the rooftop, in addition to the green roof conversation.
You're fading out there.
Have you considered any rooftop solar or renewable energy on the site?
Yeah, we don't have that in plan.
Okay, so there's been no discussion of that. Okay, and then with the building, you know, in the rendering, there's nothing. There's no penetrations on the roof. There's no, you know, there's no stacks. There's nothing. Is it going to be a conditioned building? Is it going to be heated? Are there going to be vents? Are there going to be lots of stuff coming out of that roof?
There's going to be few for the heating and ventilation to keep the equipment at close to room temperature. And there's going to be probably a couple of small 1 to 2 inch gas pipes for venting.
Okay, and when you say keeping it at temperature, is that like, does it generate a lot of internal heat gains? So are you going to be mostly cooling, or about you know, heating in the wintertime to bring it up to room temperature?
Yeah, it's going to be mostly during winter time, and it would be, again, so it's not designed for human occupancy or continued human occupancy, so it's not going to, I think the aim is to keep it above freezing, above 4 degrees, not necessarily at room temperature, just to keep few components from freezing.
And then not air conditioning in the summertime?
No.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Kevin?
No questions, thanks.
No? Okay, I think that concludes. Does anyone else have any questions before we move to comments? Okay, let's go back. Betsy, any comments?
I'll just keep this quite short because we've asked quite a few questions. I want to just congratulate your team on moving the project significantly forward and listening to the panel, actually working with us on this. I'm just going to keep it there because there's a lot of people who will bring in other issues relative to the architecture and urban piece. But thank you very much. I think it's a huge improvement.
Great, thanks, Betsy. George?
Thanks, Paul. And I know we're not supposed to repeat what other panelists say, but I want to repeat what Betsy just said, that I really appreciate the efforts the team has made to respond to what we said. I think I agree that it's a huge improvement. And I'm going to make 2 suggestions which would save some money, and my fellow panelists may not agree with me, but given that you're going to do the real brick wall at the perimeter, I don't think you need to do the fake brick wall on the building at all. I could live with a regular precast building inside the real brick wall. So that's my 2 cents worth on the building. And similarly, if there's a way of dealing with the top of the real brick wall that meets your security issues, I could do without the decorative wrought iron across the top of it as well. I'm not keen on sort of reproduction historical elements. So and so that would also save some money. I think otherwise, I think moving to real brick for the perimeter wall is the breakthrough move on this project, and probably the green roof on even 2/3 of the roof is the second most important. change you've made and the improvements to the gate at the backside as well. So with those, I'm content, and I could do without the fake brick on the building, as I've already said. Thank you.
Thanks, George. Peter?
Same as George and Betsy, and George's suggestions around saving money. I'm good with that too. You know, once inside the real brick wall, if it's an industrial building, it's an industrial building. It doesn't need to pretend to be anything else. I want some accuracy around what the green roof is. 2/3 is fine, but it's not going to be moss, so because that won't survive. So I'm very, very supportive of the resubmission and appreciate very much what Enbridge has done. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Bridget?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with my colleagues. I just want to make one kind of, while I really appreciate the real brick on the exterior, I think it's a really careful choice, and it would have been nice to have seen what that real brick looks like, because the brick of the distillery doesn't, there are no brick factories that actually make that type of brick anymore. So whether it looks different, for sure it will look different, but how it appears relative to such an immediate context of those buildings on the north side of Mill Street is kind of important. And so I really just want to make sure that it's a really thoughtful and careful decision on the exact type of real brick to be used, because there's such a range and there's some that look really suburban and others that would fit really into this context. So it's just something to think about. Then there are also some really great roofing companies where the green roof and the kind of the built up roof assembly are one entity. So you're not really, you know, typically they tend to be sedums. There's all kinds of really great companies where you're not, I agree with Peter, it's not a moss roof in any way. We're not in Vancouver, but where you can get like a 20-year warranty with a kind of good roof assembly that also has a green roof is pretty great. And I just think that to imagine it as a kind of sedum version of a green roof with robust planting that will survive in this specific climatic zone will be a huge improvement. And then my one last comment is that on the northwest side, I guess I would really like to see that opening there to be exactly the same as the opening on Trinity Street. Right now, it's like one is sort of like seen as secondary. If they were both the same, then in a way you have a secure condition, and you're addressing your future construction needs and flexibility in the long term. Because as the site becomes more developed to the west and to the north, in a way, you probably want that west side to be as secure as your front side. And so the idea that you would use whatever you use for your main entrance would be exactly the same treatment as you would use for that west side. And it may get used much less, but there's a continuity of the exterior perimeter that I think would just be kind of in keeping with all of the effort that you've put into making this fit into this unusual site. Thank you so much for your efforts.
Thanks, Bridget. Jenna.
Yeah, I concur with what my colleagues have said, and I really appreciate the amount of effort that you've made to improve the building. Just to follow up on Bridget's comment about the green roof, not only will it not be moss, but I think here's an opportunity, because you're going to see the roof from so many perspectives from above, to do something other than sedums, which are not particularly fantastic to look at, even in the best of times. So there's all kinds of very cost-effective, more what appears to be naturalized green roof planting systems now that can be done either, you know, in plugs or in trays. There's a whole range of technology, and I would encourage you to look into that, so it's not just a kind of mowed green roof. And then the other thing I'd like to comment on is the proposed lighting around the perimeter. I would suggest that a little more attention could be paid to the lighting on the exterior brick wall to bring in and recognize the ambient environment of the brick wall, the street, and the sidewalk, particularly at night. And I think if you had a different kind of lighting, a different syncopation of lighting along the masonry along the two streets, it would be a much improved environment. Thanks very much for all your work.
Okay, Pat.
Is it possible to pull up the slide where you have the precast mock-ups?
Yep.
Anyway, thanks very much for the presentation, and I concur with my colleagues. It's much improved and appreciated that you will be going constructing the perimeter wall out of brick. Whether it be brick embedded into precast is something that you could also consider. I just want to point out, I realize these are precast options, but I just want to point out, and this is actually to reinforce Bridget's comment, is that the type of brick is absolutely, quite critical to the choice about how this wall will appear. And also the grout joint. So you can see with most of the sort of older buildings in the distillery district, the joint between the bricks is usually quite narrow. So I just want to point out that your mock-up, I realize it's for the building, and I would also agree to brick is not necessary on the building, but it has a very, very wide grout line. And so if you're trying to, when you're considering, and your architect is working through detailing the perimeter wall, that joint really needs to be considered. It really shouldn't be, even 10 millimeters is sort of out of character with the heritage brick walls in the distillery district. And you can find a brick, it will be different, but you want to look for a molded brick, not a pressed brick. And that will actually also, it won't be identical, but it will have that kind of softer kind of appearance. So I just say, really pay attention to grout joints and a molded brick. And I think you need to actually, if you do want to continue with that idea of perforations, I think you'll find that the construction of this wall really is something you should start to consider soon, whether it's a block wall that gets clad with brick or it's a double wide brick wall. These are all, the construction of that wall is going to have a huge impact on its sort of ultimate appearance. So I'd suggest and I recommend that your architect start developing different sections for that wall sooner than later, because it'll have some cost impact as well. Anyway, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thanks, Pat. Fatty?
Hi, thank you. I also agree this is a huge improvement and really appreciated. I really also appreciate the kind of back research that you've done to kind of get us to this point. I think it's really great to see it in a design review panel presentation. I also just have a quick minor suggestion to echo Jana's comments about the lighting. I think, there's possibly a really great opportunity here to use these walls as a kind of community art piece, if in any way possible. And I'm wondering if the inclusion of the lighting, maybe even from the inside and through the perforations, could create a visual interest, especially at night, just by very simply backlighting or finding ways to incorporate the lighting within the perimeter of the walls, recesses themselves, and just kind of allowing them to sort of illuminate and create a kind of visual interest opportunity along the public realm. And that could go hand in hand or in coordination with how the street lighting and other trees and other kind of public right-of-way conditions might be influencing and affecting how the lighting of the street itself might be, so that you don't necessarily need to double up on the street lights if the right-of-way is already illuminated properly. Lastly, I just want to maybe advocate for the green roof just a little bit more. I would say if you do find savings in removing the precast panels along the perimeter, then all that savings should really go for the sustainability features. I really think this would become a really wonderful precedent for other Enbridge and other sort of utility and infrastructure buildings, if you will, or components within the rest of the city, and could be really pointed to as something that is contributing more to the public realm and to the kind of public space of the city, plus the kind of sustainability indicators and features that often are not thought about when we think of utility structures. So with that, I really, really appreciate all the work that's been done and the kind of progress that has been presented. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Patty. Eric, please.
Yes, I echo my colleagues' comments. I think what's nice with the approach and the use of bricks as it is suggested here, it's it's these utility building. I mean, it's great, especially in a historical context, that they blend in, that they're very sensitively integrated, so in a way they disappear. I think that's something that is makes the project really strong. I really appreciate that. Maybe a couple of suggestion in you had on the slide 18, you could see that there's the integration of the doors along Trinity, and I suspect along the new the new east-west street have like a very bold black frame. I think looking at the existing context and all that, that maybe looking at looking through your precedent, just the sensitive way doors in the distillery districts are integrated. They tend to be, using masonry, maybe just not as emphasized as they are. I think that's something that I would probably look at, and also just the location. I mean, it's not that there is you don't need to be dogmatic about that. Sometimes these door tends to be centered between, let's see, the column, but I know that it's not always the case. So just maybe something to look at. I think the wrought iron, I understand you need them for security reason on the top, and maybe that's a place where you could be slightly more contemporary on the design of it. I think as you continue the exploration of that wrought iron, that's something that can be explored. And my last comment is I think it's important for understanding on the west side and the north side what is that, whether there is an access there, or what's the condition. Is it an easement? Is it something that that the public can walk through? So just from a security perspective, how does that work? So I think that's something even for your benefit and the city's benefit to understand. Okay, what is that space, or is there space, or how do you access the building? Thank you.
Okay, Jeff.
Thanks, Paul. So, I would say, a couple of points. I appreciated Pat's comments on the grout joints. That's the first thing that I noticed. I don't know if we should give them
You're fading away there, Jeff.
Sorry, guys. So I don't know if we should be giving a pass to the building on having the brick. I think that's I think that's a feature that if it's a wall that you're seeing through, I think that looks important, personally. But in general, with the project, I mean, the external real brick, if you really want to have a sustainability impact, and this may be unrealistic, but I'd be looking at salvage brick and trying to see if you want to have an old look, that's going to have a real big embodied carbon impact on that project. And then, I mean, the other thing is there's not a lot of energy used in the building, but there is some. And I think it's very, very achievable to have this be a zero carbon facility overall. And I'd be looking at how you could do that. It's a bit of supplemental heating, some lighting. You've got some pumps and some equipment that's running, but you've got a pretty big footprint there overall on the site. And so, I think that should be a goal of this project. I know that's a corporate goal of Enbridge to start moving in that direction. So I think this facility could reflect that. Thanks.
Okay, Kevin.
Thank you. I think there will be quite a bit of concrete used in this facility, so I just want to encourage the project team to look at the embodied carbon of that and specify on all the concrete precast or cast in place supplementary cementing materials. I think it can still be very cost effective to go even up to 50%. That's my only comment. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I think anyone else have any other comments to wrap up before I summarize? Betsy.
Yeah, Paul, thank you. I just wanted to second Jeff's comment, because as I was hearing the panel talk about the brick on the building, a few things popped into my head that I thought were really important. Ordinarily, I wouldn't encourage using a faux system, so the brick and the precast. However, I'm fairly certain that dollars saved on that part of the project would not be reinvested into the project, but likely just go to savings. So I don't think we could say swap that for X in the project. The wall from above, from all the, the condos around will be, the faux will read as brick from that far away. And the most important piece is we haven't seen the alternate. So I'm really reluctant to endorse something we haven't seen on the building. So I would actually strongly be in favor of keeping the brick with the precast on the building itself in lieu of something that is kind of we don't know what it would be, and I'm not comfortable encouraging that direction.
I agree with Betsy. This is Eric.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll try and summarize the gist of the comments. I guess first, on behalf of the panel, I think we're very supportive of all the changes that you made and the serious effort that has been made to take our comments from July very, very seriously and to create what I think could, as someone said, be a precedent for a public utility building. So congrats for that. A number of suggestions have been made. I'll deal with the building first, I guess. And most recently, I think most people were comfortable with the precast being used on the building. However, there's some reluctance since we haven't seen an actual design of what it would look like. Another suggestion made of maybe using salvage bricks for the actual building inside the brick wall. So those are some different considerations, I think, that need to be really, really carefully evaluated. I think ideally, if we had our way, we'd love to see brick used for the building and the wall. But nevertheless, those are some suggestions. One comment made about the decorative wrought iron, that it may be optional if there's cost savings could be achieved. However, I don't think there was, overwhelming strong support for removing it. But it's another area that should be possibly considered. I think that one of the most important comments made by the panel is obviously strong support for using real brick on the wall. It's absolutely essential, but details matter big time. And both in terms of the texture, the pattern, the grout joints, all of those things are essential for you to do a lot of homework on to try and match the context and the character of the buildings on the north side of Mill Street. This is an area where just minor changes can really have a negative impact. And so we would encourage you very, very strongly to spend a lot of time on that before this final selection of the real brick is made. With respect to the green roof, I think most people are comfortable enough with 2/3 of the roof being in some sort of planting system. Obvious given our climate here, that different choices of planting material need to be made. But you've heard comments that there are many options on the market that need to be researched carefully. That can stand the test of time and meet our climatic conditions. But we're happy to see at least 2/3 of that roof being green. In terms of the gates moving slightly to around the walls, I think there was very good comments about the northwest gate, I'll call it, that opening, where we couldn't quite see it, but you've shown the gate to be lower than the height of the perimeter wall. And I believe I'm correct in saying, no, that actually is not going to be the case. It's going to be the same height. But that I think consensus of the panel is that for the continuity of the perimeter wall, the same treatment should be applied to that northwest gate as the main Trinity Street entrance gate. Both in terms of the color, the materiality, the height, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that'll be well worth that investment. Also, it does relate to the comment that I believe Eric made recently regarding that space to the north, what's going to happen there, and the fact that maybe there's an opportunity for a very small entrance on that north wall. In terms of the public realm and the landscape, various questions, comments made about what's the streetscape going to look like? Are there going to be trees? Our understanding is generally yes on the east-west street, but not necessarily on Trinity Street. Still perhaps to be determined, but doesn't appear to be the case. And the suggestion made about lighting on the exterior brick wall, and also to highlight, perhaps through backlighting, the interior, so people can see through and as they walk by and see what's going on behind the brick wall, to create visual interest. And I think paramount in all of this from our July comments is that this facility needs to be considered from the pedestrian perspective, from the streetscape perspective, and from the perspective of the neighbors that are going to be living in the condos surrounding this site, looking down on it. So it really, really has to sing, and all the components have to be provided. And I think we're well on our way to achieving that, but the suggestions that have been made by the panel, I think, would further enhance your facility. So,
Paul,
yeah,
this is
yeah,
George. Just a point of clarification. I took Jeff Ranson's suggestion of using salvaged brick to refer to the perimeter wall, not the building. You said the building, and I see. Maybe Jeff could clarify that.
No, that's what I was thinking. If that's
Is
where
that
you're
right? Okay.
brick, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, my apologies for that. I think, though, notwithstanding that, the real brick on the perimeter wall is where everybody is coming from. So at this point, I think give the proponent an opportunity to respond
Paul,
to what you've heard.
Paul?
Yes.
I'd just like to do one clarification. You mentioned about the comment about the potentially have an opening on the north side. That wasn't my point. What I was referring to is along Trinity Street. There is a door that's being proposed, which is perfectly fine. It was with regard, which is at the about the treatment and maybe the location within the module of the wall itself.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, over to the proponent, if you have an opportunity to respond at this point to what you've heard.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Yeah, I appreciate the comments and the feedback, of course, like we did back in July. I think for the most part, I think we're in agreement for the brick wall. We're treating it with the same sensitivity that the panel is. We understand the importance of fitting in, and I'm sure, and this has been the intention. We'll look at options for sourcing to match the existing, so that we're looking at smaller brick, where we would also have the architect on board doing the further designs to get the texture, the sizing. Those details will not be overlooked. I think the notes regarding the importance of how that wall will fit in have been received for sure. I think the couple of things I want to talk to. The first one is the green roof. I think I also want to clarify that the 2/3 element was not the only challenge that we've been working on. We're still working with our supplier on the solution that we're hoping that no structural issues will be a deal breaker. We're hoping that the maintenance they had promised us that it would be a maintenance-free solution. So we're still waiting to hear on those two. So hopefully we'll be able to commit to that. Then for now, it's still being considered. I don't think we're able to commit to that yet. The other thing with regard to the gate at the back, so the gate at the back, the challenge with that particular gate is just because we need access to, because where the building is positioned, the position of the gate cannot be halfway in the wall itself. It has to be towards the corner so that we're able to access around. And that prevented us from using the same solution that we have on Trinity Street. We did look at that. The gate at the back is not motorized. The gate on Trinity Street is. The gate, though, I just wanted to point out a few differences in between why we can't have a sliding gate, completely sliding the gate at the back due to the side of the opening. That's why part of it is also a swinging gate. So we did ideally wanted the same treatment at the back. We are not able to accommodate it due to functional and operational challenges stemming from the need of the location to be closer to the corner, which prevent a fully sliding gate because of the size. So I'm hoping that this is something that we can find middle ground on by us increasing the height to match the existing, but I'm just not able to see how that treatment that we have on Trinity Street can be used given the size and the location of the gate itself. So I think
Okay.
I think for the most part, the comments are something that we can work with. If not, we're already taken into consideration. It's those two things, just to be clear, with regard to the green roof still being under investigation and having the structural and maintenance issue, and the rear gate not would have been our go-to point to mimic what we have on Trinity Street. Wasn't for the size and location of the gate. So these are I wanted to point out of the suggestions and the great comments that we have, that those needs to be highlighted as potential items that we may not be able to commit to.
Okay, thank you, Mohammed. We need to, the panel needs to take a vote, and I think there's clearly strong support for everything that has been done, but I sense still some reservation in terms of the details associated with the brick, and the fact that we haven't seen the final selection causes me to express a little bit of reservation. So I'm just wondering how other members of the panel feel and whether a motion of conditional support at this point is the appropriate one, or whether you're comfortable enough with a full support vote. So any discussion of that?
Yeah, I'll go first. I support a conditional support motion. I'm a little concerned about the comments around brick, which are fair, but also I'm concerned about the hedging in the last statement by the proponent. Well, maybe we can do this, but maybe we can't. I can't promise this. I can't promise that. I think their intentions appear to be valid and fair and good, but I think we need to see proof. And so I go for conditional support.
Okay. Any other discussion on the part of members? I'm comfortable with that, so I'll put a motion of conditional support before the panel for a vote. Is there anyone opposed to that? It appears to be unanimous.
Paul, can
Yes.
I just suggest that if the issue is really the brick sample, could we maybe just
Sorry, Chris, we couldn't hear you there.
Could we maybe require them to send us photos of the sample brick so that we can just approve that without them having to come back again? Would that work?
It might. I don't know the comfort level of the members. People want to comment on that suggestion?
I'm
Could be in
okay.
favor of that.
I'm okay provided.
I'd be in favor of that, but I'd also be interested to see just either an elevation or a wall section, just to understand how it's going to be applied.
Okay, because these guys have already come back voluntarily once. I hate to make them come back yet another time unless we really need them to.
Yeah.
I would support Pat's suggestion as well.
Okay, a wall section showing the brick being installed, or the brick pattern, and a photograph of a sample. And if we're okay with that, then they're good to go.
I support that too. This is George.
Yeah, it's Eric. I support that.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. So we'll then have I guess, a vote of support with the photo of the sample to come back and an elevation of the wall section regarding the brick. Is that clear? Okay. Everyone comfortable with that?
Yes.
Okay, approved. Thank you very much. We're just at 11 o'clock, so we're a little bit behind, but we do need a bit of a break. How about 10 minutes? Come back at 11:10. Okay. So item 2, Lower Yonge Public Realm implementation. Remind everyone it's here for issues identification, so no vote involved, but lots of opportunity to provide feedback and flag issues that we may be concerned about and want to see addressed. So Prabir and Adam, I'm not sure who is online and who is going to introduce this.
Hi, Paul.
Looks like
this
Adam.
is Adam. Yep.
Yeah.
We're both gonna do it, but I'm
right.
gonna kick it off, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Prabir.
Okay.
Kind of into the presentation.
Sure. Thanks, Adam. This is Prabir.
Okay. Hopefully everybody can see the screen. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. My name is Adam Novak, and I'm the design project manager with Waterfront Toronto for this project. Waterfront Toronto, alongside the City of Toronto Transportation Services, are pleased to be here today with the Lower Yonge Public Realm Implementation Plan for issues identification. I also want to note too, this project is a culmination of several previous projects that have come before the panel, including the Lower Yonge Public Realm Plan, the Lower Yonge Public Realm Precinct Plan, and the Lower Yonge Precinct EA. I'll now turn it over to Prabir with City of Toronto to present the project background, context, and schedule.
Thanks, Adam. Who will be changing the slides? Can you help me with that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot. So hi, everyone. This is Prabir Das. I'm working for the city, and I am the project manager from City's End on this assignment. And thanks for the opportunity to present the overall scope and timelines and much more details to the design review panel. I'll go through, as Adam mentioned, that I will go through a couple of introductory slides giving overall area, 30% scope, and timeline. We have our consultants also present, and they will be also sharing some of the items much more in details. So, from Cities and the consultant is working on this file is WSP, and Jim is the PM on this team. And as we can see here, Nader from City Planning is the project supports from this end. Adam already mentioned his area of involvement on this file from Waterfront Toronto. Yeah, so the project area. So how we can see that the grayed areas are mainly our project area of interest. So basically, we'll be working on a couple of important items to address some issues that came out of the EA, and we'll be trying to resolve them by doing, while we are doing that 30% design, and we are looking forward to this platform. If anyone has any feedback or advice that we need to take care of while we will be designing this project. So on the next slide, we will be looking a bit more. Yes, here. So here is the main scopes. If we what we are considering on that 30% design. So basically what we are looking is conversion of Harbor Street to two-way operations. We will be working on designing Yonge Street, reconfiguration of Harbor and Yonge intersections, and Lakeshore Boulevard from Yonge to Jarvis. As we can see that the ramp of Gardiner will be demolished, and there will be some modifications. Basically, each of these scopes will be further detailed down by our consultant team to all of you later on today. So, but in a high level, that scope we are working on. So, if we go to the next slide, that's the timeline. However, I am so what I'm because I was just double checking the timeline if it's been updated or not. Please excuse us because the date shown here is a bit different than what is in our mind. Basically, our presentation will include the correct dates, so we can go through the dates at that time. So yeah, I believe that was from our city end, but as I mentioned, that we are really happy to present our initial thinking, where we are, and what are the scopes we are keeping in our mind, and we are quite open to get feedback from the team from this DRP, and we can start any kind of conversation to see the merit of the feedback and also how we can accommodate them. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Prabir. Now I'd like to kind of summarize the recap from the September 2015 DRP that was given for the public realm strategy consensus comments. So the comments were, what is the city getting back and what is it going to look like 10 to 50 years from now? In terms of principles, density will be fine, provided that transit infrastructure is there to support it and the community services are in place. It is absolutely critical for these to be in place. Connections to the surrounding fabric, north-south connections to the waterfront are powerful, and the public realm needs to support the density, wide sidewalks. Public realm itself, in particular the park, there's an argument for both sides. The adequacy of a park that's sized to support the density, there needs to be a network for people to be able to move north-south. The connection between Cooper and Church should be pursued earlier, not later. There were concerns about the floor-to-ceiling glass towers and energy performance, willing to help the city staff in the face of an OMB challenge, and convene a joint panel to discuss citywide building issues. The project also came back in December 2015 for stage 2, and the consensus comments were as follows. The panel will accept the location of the proposed park. The emphasis on north-south promenade connections is good. There should be no above-grade bridges within the precinct area, and perhaps consider whether is it necessary to have a bridge over Lakeshore Boulevard. Be cognizant of the heritage buildings on site. Public art plan is an important aspect to create a strong public realm for the precinct. And the panel voted unanimously in support of the project. I also kind of in more detail just want to summarize these kind of background projects, including the precinct plan and the public realm plan for the panel's reference as this project builds upon those. So in terms of the area context, we're talking about kind of this site here, which is 9 hectares of commercial and industrial land in the heart of the central waterfront. Kind of zooming in basically to the site, we are bordered on the east by Lower Jarvis, on the west by Yonge, on the north by Lakeshore Boulevard, and on the south by Queens Quay. Also kind of want to highlight Lower Yonge's connections. to the surrounding park and public space in relation to key north-south streets within the downtown core. It's kind of one of the main objectives of this project. And we also want to encourage the activation and connection to underutilized publicly owned spaces in the vicinity of the of Lower Yonge, such as under the Gardner. We're also looking at mid-block connections within the public realm plan. The plan illustrated a finer grain network to connect people through building sites and enhance pedestrian permeability. We're striving to encourage walking and discourage the use of automobiles for short trips. Within the public realm plan, we also identified 4 types of streets as follows. I'll just go through in terms of kind of hierarchy. So the intention is Queens Quay East would be a main street primary, and then Harbor Street would be a main street local. So kind of the 2 major east-west streets. In terms of promenade streets, really enforcing the north-south connection. Starting on the west, Yonge is the first, Cooper, and Lower Jarvis in terms of the promenade streets. And then in terms of the neighborhood streets, Freeland and New Street are considered the neighborhood streets. Just kind of also want to quickly highlight, because this is the only spot that I'm showing it in plan, the public realm plan also kind of emphasized and dictated basically the various hierarchies for the street trees lining the street. So the intention is Queens Quay basically has a triple alley of trees, 1 row on the north, 2 on the south. Harbor Street has a double alley, 1 row on the north, 1 row on the south. And then Yonge, Cooper, and Jarvis all have a triple alley. And then Freeland and New Street all have a double alley. I'll quickly go through the street sections because WSP will go through this kind of in more detail in their presentation. But essentially for Harbor Street, in between Bay to Yonge, we're proposing a 4-lane street with bidirectional cycle track. And for Harbor, in between Yonge to Lower Jarvis, we're proposing 3-lane with bidirectional cycle path. Next, moving on to Yonge, the north-south connection. So Yonge, south of Harbor, 3 lanes with unidirectional cycle tracks is proposed. And then on Yonge, north of Harbor to Lakeshore, 4 lanes with unidirectional cycle track is proposed for the street section. Moving to Freeland Street. So we're moving still north-south connection, but 1 street to the east. Freeland between Queens Quay to Harbor, a 2-lane street with TTC resting area is being proposed. And then on Freeland in between Harbor and Lakeshore, 2 lanes plus parking is being proposed where appropriate. Moving further to the east, on Cooper between Queens Quay to Lakeshore, we're proposing 3 lanes with a future unidirectional bike facility. And then on New Street, kind of moving even further to the east, we're proposing 2 lanes plus parking. And then on Lower Jarvis, we're proposing 4 lanes plus off-peak parking plus unidirectional cycle tracks. And then on Lakeshore, we're proposing 3 lanes plus a wider boulevard. I also just kind of want to quickly highlight the streetscape plan, as WSP will also go into more detail. But the main objective of the plan was to provide a paving palette for consistency to create a coherent sense of identity within the precinct. And then we're also intending to provide consistency throughout the rest of the waterfront. So with regards to the street materials, on the north side of Harbor Street and Cooper Street and Jarvis, we're proposing basically single row of trees with our typical concrete paver. Then for Yonge Street on the east side, Cooper Street on the east side, and Jarvis Street on the west side, we're proposing the double alley of trees with the traditional concrete paver. And then for Harbor Street on the south side, we're proposing the double row of trees combined with cast in place concrete and concrete pavers. And then second to last for the service streets, which are Yonge on the west side, Freeland Street and New Street, we're proposing a single row of trees and cast in place concrete paving. And then lastly, for the Gardner public realm, we're also acknowledging that we want to create kind of a consistent identity to the rest of the Gardner public streetscape realm. And then lastly, for Queens Quay, just for reference, for the interim condition, we're proposing the double row of trees on the south and then a single row on the north. And then lastly, just kind of want to touch on materials and design standards from the public realm plan. So quite consistent with the rest of the waterfront, granite in the colors used elsewhere, concrete pavers as used elsewhere, cast in place concrete. I think we're still kind of considering what exactly the standard would be with regards to the concrete. The idea of using a signature light pole consistent without the waterfront, and then a consistent family of street furniture as well, and consistent planting details. Lastly, I just want to show the EA plan that Waterfront Toronto and the city prepared in May 2018, as this informs the scope of the Lower Yonge project. So as Prabir mentioned, kind of some of the main objectives: Harbor Street, conversion of Harbor Street to a two-way operation east of York. Second, looking at the eastbound Bay Street ramp, removal of the eastbound Bay Street ramp onto the Gardner Expressway. Third, looking at the Lower Jarvis off-ramp, shortening the Lower Jarvis off-ramp from the Gardner Expressway to touchdown at Yonge. We are intending to normalize Harbor Street at the Yonge and Harbor Street intersection and the Yonge and Lakeshore intersection. Acknowledging the future Harbor Street extension. Acknowledging Lakeshore will be reconstructed at some point. New North-South Street, which is here. And then Cooper Street extension. And we're also too looking at kind of some of the work that has been done to date for Lakeshore Boulevard and the adjacent kind of public realm context and projects that are occurring further to the east of our scope, as shown here in magenta. And then lastly, just kind of want to go through the DRP process for this project. So right now we're November 2020 for issues ID, and then we're intending to come back in the future for stage 2 schematic design, stage 3 detailed design, and then at some point in the future for stage 4 construction documents as required. Lastly, just want to share areas for panel consideration. So first, ensuring the precinct vision is adequately implemented in preliminary and detailed design, integration with adjacent major projects and other efforts done to date, such as Lakeshore Boulevard work, ensuring the configuration of street trees meets the vision of street trees documented in the Lower Yonge precinct plan, and then lastly, looking at material and furniture alignments as defined in the Lower Yonge precinct plan and maintaining consistency with waterfront standards. So from here, I'd like to turn it over to the design team, WSP. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Jim Goff. I'm the project manager for WSP, and Tundi Pasai is going to share our presentation. Tundi?
I think Tunde's muted.
Possibly. Yes, she is muted. Tunde, unmute.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to do the first part anyway, and Tunde will come in and hopefully unmute herself at some point.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I was navigating my multiple screens here. Can everyone hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second, Jim. So what I was trying to tell you while you didn't hear me is just, I was just wondering if you can see my screen well.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we got it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Here we go.
Great. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present. We're certainly looking forward to the panel's input. I see Tunde's going to whip through these very quickly for me. So here's our agenda. We're just going to give you the introduction to the study team, go over a bit of project description, but Adam's really talked about that a lot. So I will be very quick in that, especially covering the planned improvements. Then Tunde's going to take over and talk about the specific streetscape issues for each of the streets within the precinct and beyond in our study area. And then we'll wrap up with next steps and have some discussion. Tunde, next. So Prabir already kind of introduced the team from WSP. I'm the project manager. Chris Sogios is on the line, I think, and he's the project coordinator. Tunde is the urban designer, and we also have Tool Design helping out as well. Next. So the project description very quickly. So the Lower Yonge precinct boundary is shown as the black dashed line, which you're all probably familiar with. The study in their RFP to us actually expanded that to include the area shown in the red dashed line, just to include a couple of other projects that we'll talk about in a moment. Next. So the project scope, Prabir already showed this slide. I just want to highlight this in terms of things that are not included, and those are the extension of Harbour Street east of Yonge over to Jarvis, the Cooper extension to the Esplanade, and also the new street running north-south between Cooper and Lower Jarvis. The two southerly pieces there are going to be delivered by Pinnacle and Menkes, and the Cooper Street tunnel is down the road in terms of the city's planning for that. Tunde? So what is included is the 30% design, including streetscape, for the conversion of Harbour Street to two-way operation, the changes to Yonge Street, the reconfigured Harbour-Yonge intersection, and Lakeshore Boulevard expansion from Yonge over to Jarvis Street. Next. And so just breaking that down a bit, the first thing we would do, and not necessarily in chronological order, but one of the key things is to remove the Gardner Expressway ramps, the eastbound Bay Street on-ramp, and the eastbound Jarvis Street off-ramp. Next. And then we would replace the Jarvis Street off-ramp to some degree by a new ramp that would touch down at Yonge Street instead, connecting to Lakeshore Boulevard. The next project is reconstruction of Lakeshore Boulevard between Yonge and Jarvis, including an expansion to add a new lane, plus the streetscape. Next. Fourth is preliminary engineering design for conversion of Harbour Street to two-way operation between York and Yonge Street, including streetscape improvements. This is largely a matter of restriping. No widening of the street is actually planned as part of this. Next. On Yonge Street, what we're planning to do is install the cycling infrastructure from Queens Quay up to Front Street and any relevant intersection designs that go along with that. Next. Number 6 is just defining the profile of Cooper Street between Queens Quay and Lakeshore Boulevard and making sure that the intersection design can accommodate the future tunnel that will lead north from Lakeshore under the Gardner and the rail corridor. Next. Number 7 is the conceptual design for the 2 remnant plaza spaces at the Yonge Harbour intersection when we reconfigure that to a typical cross intersection. So just in terms of project schedule, these are the correct dates. So we're just finishing up all of our stakeholder startup meetings in the next couple of weeks, completing the site investigations this month. We're doing a lot of traffic modeling. That is just starting now, and that's really on the critical path for the study. So that's going to extend until August 2021. It's quite a broad area that we're modeling, all the way from the DVP over to Strawn Avenue or beyond in the west. Once we have the traffic modeling results, then we can complete the preliminary designs. So those are expected in October 2021. And parallel to that, we'll be doing a constructability assessment, looking at the structural elements, the road design elements, all of those things, to make sure that we have a good plan for actually implementing all of these projects that are included in the scope. And finally, we'll be wrapping up the pre-design report, scheduled for March 2022, though we'll be trying to accelerate that if we can. And at that point, I believe I turn it over to Tundi.
Thank you, Jim. So I'll try my best not to repeat what's been said already, but please let me know if I'm going too fast, Jim. Thank you. Okay, so the first piece for the urban design scope is really our third item. As Jim mentioned, it's the Lakeshore Boulevard realignment. And this is just an image of the current Lakeshore looking west at Cooper Street. In terms of our scope, again, it's just a streetscaping between Yonge and Jarvis. A few snapshots of the existing conditions. You can see the Gardner ramp between York and Bay, the two eastbound Gardner on and off ramps that are currently crossing the airspace between 16 Yonge parcel and the Gardner. That the pedestrian realm is generally poor, not conducive for walking along the entire stretch, with partial narrow sidewalks on the south side and only between Yonge and Jarvis. There are no trees, no bike lanes, minimal indirect street lighting. And a quick overview of the EA plan and the cross sections for Lakeshore. So the construction of the new Gardner Expressway eastbound Yonge Street off-ramp between Bay and Yonge is meant to have streetscape along Lakeshore between Yonge and Jarvis. We're also going to look at the intersection designs, and we'll be looking at proposing streetscape tree planting and sidewalk improvement on the south side. And within this stretch, there are two distinct segments as follows. So between Yonge and Cooper Street, we have 3 lanes with 2 turning lanes. And the proposed solution is to have the same number of lanes with a wider boulevard. The next segment between Cooper and Jarvis currently has 3 lanes with 2 turning lanes. Proposed is the same number of lanes with the wider boulevard as well. Few considerations for the area is really the coordination with the Gardner Public Realm Plan. On the south side, we're considering new trees to be planted in tree grades with soil cells, 2.4 meter pedestrian clearway. And then on the north side, the landscaping of the residual space, whatever that might look like. A few key issues here is really the consideration for the under the Gardner design development and the coordination with that project. In terms of inspiration for us, what we're looking at right now is really having some historical accents on the hardscape. We're looking at some vertical wall or embankment, temporary seasonal art projections at the tunnel, and then to integrate lighting design for that future underpass at Cooper. That's really where we see an opportunity to do something more meaningful in terms of design. Harbor Street. And that was just a quick view of Harbor Street North on the north side looking east at Yonge. I'm not going to repeat this. We're really looking at mainly working beyond the curb and towards the property line to improve the sidewalk and the streetscape, as well as the intersection redesign at Yonge Street. Current conditions, you can see here that the one-way traffic operations between Lakeshore and Yonge Street, streetscape improvements will be completed, are completed, west of Bay. And that included the installation of the bidirectional cycle track on the south side, the low-profile black granite planters, granite plank pavers on the north side, and updated city light standards. However, west of Bay is where the general existing conditions of the streetscape paving and the furnishings are poor. They're aging and they're in need of repairs and updates. So perfect timing for us to come in. And just a quick overview of the EA plan. You will see there's two distinct segments here that we're looking at. Of course, the conversion of the two-way operations between York and Yonge Street being the major moves, and then the intersection reconfiguration and the realignment of the right-of-way. In the first segment, as I mentioned, most of the streetscape has already been completed west of Bay. The 4 lanes with the one-way traffic that's currently there and the bidirectional cycle track will be converted now to a 2-way traffic. Okay, Harbor Bay to Yonge. We're proposing a 4-lane 2-way traffic with a cycle track and the planting and street lighting improvements, and the complete reconfiguration at the Yonge with major changes for the public realm in front of 10 Yonge. 10 Yonge is where we will we'll have to coordinate delicately with the existing development there, and that conversation has already started. Okay, quick reminder of the public realm plan streetscape details. You will see here that on the north side, there's a single row of trees in soil cells being proposed with a 3.1 meter pedestrian clearway and the standard waterfront concrete pavers. Oops, sorry, too quick. On the south side, we are looking at a double row of trees with soil cells, a clearway of 3.1 meters, and that bidirectional cycle track. Inspiration for this area, similar, just looking at historical accents on the hardscape, some ample seating, tree plantings, and water and mist features to be added to the Northwest Plaza redesign at Harbor and Yonge. And now moving on to Yonge Street. This is a quick view of the current conditions looking south from the west side of the street. And the project scope, like Jim mentioned, is really the installation of the cycling infrastructure along Yonge on both sides, streetscape design from Queens Quay to Front, and the intersection designs. Existing conditions looking south on Yonge Street, the single row of trees in tree grades and on-street bike lanes on both sides. The midsection of the street has ample tree plantings. The tunnel is in need of general repairs and improved lighting. And the general condition of the paving and streetscape furnishings, again, is poor, aging, and in need of repairs. An overview of the EA plan, sorry for, this is the north is horizontal here. So it's, we had to rotate the plan, but quick snapshot of 5 different conditions, different sections for the street. So on the south, we have 3 lanes of traffic with separate cycle tracks near the curb, continued all the way to Esplanade, where cycle track is moved on road. The proposed streetscape tree planting example on the south of Lakeshore and minimal north of it. And so quick snapshot of the 5 distinct segments. The first one being at Queens Quay, between Queens Quay and Harbor. We have 3 lanes of separated cycle tracks proposed with a single row of trees inside the right-of-way and a second row beyond the property line where possible. Next segment between Harbor and Lakeshore, we have 4 lanes of separated cycle track plus separated cycle tracks and a single row of trees in tree grades. Next one is between Lakeshore and the railway. We only have 4 lanes with a median, the separate cycle tracks, and fully mountable curbs, but no more tree planting in this segment. Under the rail corridor, what we're proposing is that we have a 4-lane plus median, and the separate cycle tracks with the fully mountable curbs as well, and improvements to the tunnel and the lighting. And then beyond, I believe this is the last segment, between rail and Front Street, we have 4 lanes, the turning lane and on-road bike lanes in this area. We can't have them separated as per the EA. A reminder of the Lower Yonge public realm plan details for this area. On the west side of Yonge, we have a single row of trees in tree grade, solid tree plantings, 2.5 meter pedestrian concrete clearway. And then on the east side, we have double row of trees in tree grade, soil tree plantings, 3.1 meter pedestrian clearway with concrete pavers. And the key issue here, from what we've seen, is the accommodation of the second row of trees within the right-of-way, as the EA showing this being in the private property. Inspiration, not too dissimilar to the previously mentioned streets. We will look at the historical accents on the hardscape, vertical wall embankment, temporary seasonal art projections, applied lighting, and projection on the pass, as we can't redesign completely the underpass. Now, Cooper Street, as Jim mentioned, we have limited intervention here. Jim's team will be redefining the profile of the street between Queensquay and Lakeshore, and the intersection design is the one we'll be looking at in more detail to accommodate that future tunnel. No streetscaping, unfortunately. Just a few images of the current conditions here. You can see that there's no, well, it's kind of hard to imagine, but there's no sidewalks and it's quite narrow. The frontages are super close. Okay. Next, this is a quick overview of the EA plan and the cross sections associated in the area. So between Queensquay and Lakeshore, we have on-street cycle tracks, single row of tree plantings and sidewalks. And then you can see the extension to Esplanade through the tunnel beneath the rails in here. And this is the tunnel alignment. You'll see we have 4 lanes of traffic, well, 2 on either side, and then completely physically separated pedestrian clearway and the cycle tracks in that tunnel. Right, in terms of the plaza design, sorry, that was a wrong image there. As Jim mentioned, so due to that reconfiguration of Harbor and Lakeshore, there's some remnant plaza spaces that will be integrated in those adjacent parcels. And so we will be looking at some preliminary design ideas or considerations to be coordinated with the designers for these. So for the Northeast Plaza, this is a view across the plaza looking west, and you will see that it's got a very interesting, sneaky little preview of CN Tower. There are some existing trees and bicycle parking in that the little plaza that's there already. And then on the southwest corner, on the southwest plaza, sorry, this is northwest, I'm getting confused. The proposed configuration of Lakeshore results again in some additional plaza enhancement opportunities for us. The inspiration for the two will be some materials, public plaza seating, water and mist elements celebrating the former shores of Lake Ontario, some, again, historical accents on the hardscape, and ample seating. Few of the ideas that we wanted to highlight at the moment, I know this is early on, but this is what we've seen so far, and for a cohesive new streetscape assembly design. Number 2, that the south terminus of Yonge Street has an opportunity for gateway feature and commemorative public art. And 3rd, the preliminary design for new public plazas at the southwest corner, coordination on the preliminary design for new public plaza at the northeast corner, coordination of the intersection designs with the abutting streets and the adjacent developments. And then a few of the issues is the loading and access impacts to that laneway due to Lakeshore realignment. The laneway access considerations at Bay Street, grading and loading challenges along sidewalk at business and retail entrances, plaza and landscape improvement, redesign coordination, the intersection functionality and conflicts, and the number 5, underground connection and intersection grading, number 6, and then the undefined development phasing for number 7. A few considerations again in terms of the existing pavement type. Quite a variety of paving that's currently there throughout the study area. Various improvements have been started, but we just need to make sure that we have a cohesive approach to these. And then in terms of inspiration for us, what we're thinking at the moment, and I mentioned this throughout the presentation, that for the plaza design in particular, we want to draw inspiration from the historical past of the area, remembering the shores of Lake Ontario and its cultural and indigenous past. the water will be a key design element for us. And I think as we are so close to the water, we see this as an opportunity to add it as a key design element for the plazas. Again, a reminder of the proximity to Lake Ontario and the harbor. And so we propose a stronger celebration of Yonge Street's southern terminus through public art and landscaping elements that integrate this in the streetscape design. Light installation is another element that we'd like to integrate in the streetscape. So we'll look at some ideas to improve lighting throughout while finding inspiration and celebrating the cultural and historical significance of the area. And what I'm showing here is a few precedents that we really liked. So markings on the left side is showing a Danish precedent from an artist who scratched contemporary scenes into black slides for a projector. So and then the second one, Gili, a precedent from Australia, where a year-round projection at sunset tells stories of ancient First Nations in a 7-minute projection. This is in Australia, the Sydney Opera House. And then Cité Mémoire in Montreal, precedent where the artist wanted to tell the story of the city's past and the history and how people lived through projections on these remnant facades and empty facades. Continuing on the lighting theme, we feel like there's an opportunity to introduce some, some temporary lighting fixtures in the plazas, and then additional open space light installations, decorative lighting for the underpass and the tunnel. And we have a few really strong precedents that we liked, wanted to mention here. In terms of our next steps, as Jim mentioned, we are completing the site investigations. We are talking to stakeholders and we're learning quite a lot from walking through their existing concerns. We will be coordinating the standards, and then thirdly, we'll start the preliminary concept for the plazas and the streetscape in general. And I guess that was it. I hope I didn't run over time too much.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, let's move to questions from the panel. And obviously, since we're dealing with public realm, I'm going to give Eric an opportunity to open it up, and then we'll move through the list. So Eric, are you there?
Yes, I am. I've got a few questions in terms of, so you mentioned that there is in your first stage of, I've got 4 questions. You're going to be doing some modeling of traffic and throughout the areas and all that. What is it, following that modeling, are they potentially going to be changes to the functional design of some of these streets? I'm just trying to understand what might be the outcome of the modeling on the public realm structure.
Thanks for the question, Eric. I don't think there's going to be any significant change to the functional plan for the roadways in this area. I think it's more a matter of ensuring that this traffic can be accommodated kind of over the broader waterfront area, which is why the city has defined that really broad study area for us. This plan has gone through quite an exhaustive analysis to get to this point. So I really don't see changing the road networks in any significant way.
Okay. And in terms of you mentioned, maybe this is a question for Tunde, the plaza design, is your team responsible for the 2 plazas, the design itself, or are you just setting parameters for future designer, or is the design integrated within your team?
Yeah, so maybe I wasn't too clear there. There's 2 plazas. So the northeast one, it's currently with Pinnacle and NAC Design, and so we're just coordinating the interface with the public realm and the right-of-way piece, if you will.
I see.
And then on the other side, west of Yonge, we are actually looking at some early design ideas, conceptual design ideas, as that's an existing building. So we're just gonna look at a bit more input there for that plaza.
Okay. And another piece is you show those example of the lighting installation, the public art approach. And I just want to understand, how does that component fits within the overall public art strategy that that Waterfront Toronto has?
Yeah, perhaps I should have looking at coordinating with whatever Waterfront Toronto has put forward, and we don't want to come in too strongly with anything that doesn't fit, but it's something that we feel there's space for. So we will be coordinating with Waterfront on that. Thank you.
Okay, and my last question is,
Yeah.
they are a, I mean, it's an A and a B, but there are a series, like you mentioned, there's the Gardner public realm that's being looked at. There are some study, for example, around the loading accessibility of around the hotel on Queensquay. How's that whole coordination's happening? Because I think that's obviously one of the critical pieces here, because there's a lot of work happening throughout the whole area, and I guess I just want to hear maybe how is that happening?
So we're just maybe Jim can mention can intervene here a little bit, but we've just started the stakeholder meetings, and so those are pretty strong conversations, and we're listening at the moment. So we're in listening mode. We're noting it's been a few years since the EA has been completed, quite frankly. So there's a lot of change, and you know, the conversations have started. We noted all the strong arguments that they brought forward, and then we started the conversation with the designers to make sure that we do have time to sort of realign and align certain things that might not be perfect at the moment. So there's a lot of considerations, and it'll go a bit slowly at the beginning, but I think we can. We're looking forward to to the next design sessions with these teams. But so far so good. So the conversations have been happening, and they've been quite productive so far.
Okay, and then on the last one, it's the foot of Yonge Street. I know that there's some elements dealing with, you know, how you deal with the buses, with the loading, with the hotel. What is your scope there in terms? Because I mean, to me, that's one of a critical piece of you know, how this determination happens. So just want to see how that, you know, what's your scope within that, or your area of influence.
Yeah, the foot of Yonge, unfortunately, we have a limited scope there. As far as I understand, Jim, if I'm not mistaken, it's really just looking at the two sides of the street north of that intersection with Queensquay. So we're looking at the space within the right of way only. Yeah.
We are coordinating with the team that's working on Queensquay, though, Eric, because, you know, obviously Yonge Street is where we both meet. So we had a call with them last week, and I think as we go forward, we will have more calls to ensure that the two designs fit together. But really, they're looking at everything essentially from the edge of the right of way of the north side south. You know, we recognize there's a lot going on the south side there with that new driveway that's proposed and everything, but that's in their hands.
Okay, thank you. No more questions.
Thanks, Eric. Fatty?
Eric asked most of the questions that I had. Thank you. I just, one really quick, just super high level clarification. Your role here is mostly a kind of coordination role between all the different pieces in the construction of the public realm, like or are you actually proposing specific designs for specific areas? Because again, I see a lot of these kind of precedents, inspiration. It seems like there's quite a lot of road kind of section redesigns. Then there are like you mentioned, the one from Pinnacle and NAC, plus, you know, the Gardner, Lakeshore. Like, is your job mostly a kind of overall coordination between all these different pieces and elements? Or is there specific sites that you're redesigning and specific road sections that you're redesigning with your own palette?
So our contract, and Jim, please feel free to interject here. Our contract is really to look at the redesign within the right of way. But because if you remember those slides where I showed how the property line straddles and how the public realm straddles actually that right of way edge, we absolutely have to coordinate as well. And so that's critical, because it just comes down to understanding what various landscape architects and urban designers have proposed in terms of tree grade types, pavers, tree species, and so on. And so you need to have a cohesive approach. So that's going to be critical for us and the city to drive a little bit that design intent along the streets, and then work with, if, you know, obviously a lot of the design work on the developer side has progressed significantly, and so we're catching up a little bit to them, if you will. And that's part of the key challenges for us, is just making sure that we can catch up quickly, and that whatever temporary conditions we have left are are not impeding the pedestrian movement and the streetscape while we wait for our scope to be finalized. So the phasing, I think it's a critical piece that we need to understand, the phasing and the coordination with these development plans, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'm not sure. Is Nina Marie, is she able to join us yet? Do you know, Leon?
Yeah, I don't think she's here yet.
Not yet, eh? She was going to
Maybe she'll be here
rejoin
for
for
the
this item.
comments.
So, okay,
Yeah.
I'll come back to her. Okay, so let's go to architects. Betsy, do you want to weigh in?
So just another clarification question. The pieces that we're looking at more specifically than today for critique would be things like the road section that you're kind of pursuing, actively, and less so the design inspiration. Is that correct?
Well, I think we'd love to hear as much feedback as possible, because these are just early ideas and thoughts, and we're mainly hoping to hear back on issues that we missed, as again, it's been quite a few years since the EA. Well, it's not that long, 3 years for us and 2 years for you guys, but yeah, so I think it's mainly issues and considerations that we might have missed so far.
Yep. Okay, Betsy. George? George, are you there?
I'm here, yes, but I have no questions.
Oh, okay, fine. Peter?
I only have one question. It's peripheral. I'm just wondering why it's taking so long.
You mean
I mean,
us?
We're moving at the speed of light. I think that's Prabir. Do you want to take that one?
Yes. So, as you know that in the city we have lots of other projects in the vicinity of this project itself. Also, there are Gardener, there are Portland, that Gardener East in coordination with Portland area, and then there is East Harbor, and also on the Gardener West we need to do implement some of the 5 to 10 years old EA works also. So we are working really hard to have it implemented, but we also need to coordinate internally and prioritize our work and budget, and also most importantly the traffic impact due to the other projects. So we cannot really touch too many sections at the same time, considering how sensitive the traffic in the whole corridor is. So apparently it may look like that it getting too long. However, I can assure you that that's the best we can accommodate.
Okay, Peter, any other questions?
No other questions.
Oh, okay. Bridget?
Yeah, can you tell me what the projected population is for this precinct?
I don't have the number offhand. Is Nadar on the line? I believe it's upwards of 10,000.
So it's and the kind of red zone to the left hand, like that was the expanded zone. I mean, there's a couple of towers I know of Pinnacle that are close to 90 stories tall, and then the Toronto Star building is about 30 stories tall, like with the new additions on top of it. So there's a lot of people in this area, right? Like I just want to get a sense of, is it the size of Gravenhurst, or is it Parry Sound, or both together, or just to understand the kind of order of magnitude of inhabitants. So does anyone have a sense of that, so that I could just kind of wrap my head around the numbers of people we're looking at that will be living in this precinct?
This is Adam from Waterfront Toronto. We're thinking it's like around 35,000 from the precinct plan. But I'm trying to find the exact number, but I think 35,000 is what we remember off the top of our heads.
That's helpful. And then I guess, is there a public park in this precinct? Because no one mentioned it at all, but I remember in earlier presentations that there's an entire block that is a public park. There were discussions about where it was located, but it did not really come up at all in this conversation about the public realm.
If I may, so I don't know if you recall the earlier slides, our scope is really on the periphery of the precinct plan. So we're looking at Yonge and Lakeshore only, and the park you mentioned is within the public realm plan. And so we can go back to that slide if you will.
That would be really helpful because I want to understand how is the park being handled. So clearly what I'm hearing from you is it's not part of your scope at all.
No,
but
it
I
isn't.
guess I'm trying to understand whose scope is it? Like how is it being implemented? Is there a competition? What are the kind of, so this may not be something that's appropriate for you guys to answer, but I feel that someone needs to answer that because it's such a key component of a precinct that has upwards of 35,000 people living in it.
Agreed. So I'll let Adam answer that or someone else from the city.
And can I see an image where I can see where the park is located? Because even in your plans, it wasn't really rendered as green. And so it was very hard for me to understand.
Yeah, we try to stay away from it. Yeah, so Adam, your early slides, I believe you had the Lower Yonge precinct plan diagrams.
Yeah,
can you go back to that
can,
presentation?
Yeah, let me, I'll actually just share the precinct plan. Hopefully you can see this. So my understanding, I think we're talking about this square here.
Yep.
This, which is intended to be a future park. And in terms of the delivery agreement, actually Nader would probably be the best one to speak to this. But I think he's having trouble unmuting himself, but I believe it is a developer delivered park as part of one of the adjacent developments, but I can't speak to the particular details of that.
So I would think that any kind of introduction about this precinct plan would need to tell us about this park. What's happening, you know, how it's being implemented. It's a huge piece of the public realm within this kind of area. And it, you know, if it's not the scope of the proponent, I just feel like as part of a kind of broader overview, it's quite important that we understand the, you know, what's happening with it, its timeline, its design, just because it's so critical to so many aspects of this area.
Yeah, understood.
Sorry, it's Nader Kadri from the City of Toronto. Can everyone hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry about that. I had some difficulties joining in. So the Lower Yonge Park is a big part of this precinct. You're absolutely correct. It's going to be several years before we have it. It's been tapped into the Block 4 of the Menkes development, which is now being reviewed at the site plan level. It requires that part of the warehouse building that exists on that site be demolished. So there is a plan in place for us to obtain the lands from Menkes to be able to build this park in the future. But it's likely several years out. And when it does come time for the park to be designed and built out, I would imagine that the Parks Department here at the city will go through an extensive competition process to bring on someone to help with the design of that. It is the obligation of the city to design and build that park. The park will also need to serve additional functions for the community. There is a school that is meant to be located on the Block 4 development for Menkes, and the school does require that a portion of that park be dedicated for use of the students at that school.
Thank you. And then my last question was the coordination between, we've seen presentations for Lakeshore Boulevard east of Jarvis that have been presented to us by West 8. and their work extends all the way to Booth Street and maybe all the way over to Carlaw in the East End. Where's the line between the West 8 work and the work of WSP? Is it Jarvis Street, or it was just not clear to me in the bigger picture, the kind of division between the various consultants that are actually tackling Lakeshore Boulevard.
For us, it's Jarvis Street.
So you are Jarvis Street West,
Right.
and West 8 is Jarvis Street East. And is
Right.
there any kind of dialogue between WSP and West 8 in terms of kind of, you know, coordination of, because in a way I'm just trying to understand context and issues of material palette, lighting, you know, is there a kind of ongoing dialogue between the city, Waterfront, West 8,
Yeah,
and you guys, or?
I can
Bridget,
answer
can I actually just ask Pina maybe to answer that question, because the two projects aren't actually right next to each other, and she probably has a better handle on that than this consultant team, I think.
Sure, I can jump in to say that the work being done by West 8 was to develop a public realm strategy for Lakeshore from Jarvis all the way to Carlaw, and it's really focused on modifications of the Gardner Expressway. That being said, and Prabir, I'll turn over to you in a second. I know you're also working pretty actively on this stuff. That being said, it sets some design standards that certainly could be applied, and we hope could be extended to the west if and when Lakeshore to the west were to be delivered. The work that West 8 has put into place is really focused on the Gardner modifications and the need for Lakeshore to be reconsidered as part of the Gardner modification work. And Prabir, maybe you can take it from here.
Sure. Thanks, Pina. No, you are absolutely right. So, just to assure the team, is I am also the PM from transportation into Gardner East EA file. So basically, I'm the person who is looking both of the projects. So in terms of coordinating these two of the projects, yes, we are and we will be. And yes, we have that West 8 report ready, and it has been shared, or it will be shared, because the report is with me, I know. So with this consulting team, so that the whole Lakeshore, when people start walking through the Lakeshore, people should get the same feeling. It's not that, okay, hey, this portion of the lakeshore looks different than this portion. So it should have the same materialistic, or the tree or the planting, that the feeling should be unique. It shouldn't be different in terms of the public realm portion.
Great. Thank you for the clarification. It really helps me a lot. I was just some missing pieces that I just didn't quite understand. So thank you very much.
Eric, you have a point you want to make? No? Okay. All right. Okay, I'll go to Jana.
Oh, he's over here.
Yeah, are you there?
I think Jenna
did she leave?
Had to leave. Yeah.
Okay. Pat?
Yeah, this sort of an odd question, I suppose, but I'm just curious as to kind of the state of the art or thinking around the width of lanes, lane widths in roadway construction. Just wondering if there's a possibility where it can continue to try to push to narrow the width, or if that's part of the discussion in your world about, you know, how we kind of try to make streets a little bit more hospitable for pedestrians. Is there any kind of continued research on that?
I'll kick it off. We do have to, of course, abide by the city's guidelines for lane widths. And there are a few of these streets where TTC is planning to run bus service. So we will need to take that into account on, I believe, Yonge and Harbor. So that's a bit of a wrinkle to make sure that we've got at least the curb lane wide enough for the buses. But we're happy to explore with the city whether within the range of numbers within the guidelines we can tend towards the narrower. Just, we need to recognize the function of the streets as well.
Okay. Kevin.
Thank you. I was just wondering what the considerations for stormwater management might play as some of these sort of larger tenants or principles are being developed, vis-a-vis permeability or any form of retention, or how would this plan help the city manage surface runoff? Is that part of the mandate?
Who's best to answer that one?
I can start. So for the public realm, we haven't really started the design, obviously, but from past experience and from past projects, there's a few things that we've done successfully, well, yet to be observed in time, where we did harvest the runoff off the street and we integrated it into the soil trenches on the public realm. That's something that the city has done at 6 points. It's a project. I'm not sure how much room there will be for these for these soil trenches here to do something similar with these pop catch basins and the integration in the irrigation system within the soil trenches. But Jim, if we get to that, our expertise obviously will come in handy in discussing those details with you guys. So it's something that we absolutely see as incredible to be implemented here as well. Working with permeable pavers, working with the Waterfront Toronto standards are top of mind for us. Not sure if there's room for any bioswales or any other features like that, but we'll certainly consider anything we can do in lowering that stormwater runoff for sure. From my perspective, Jim, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
There's not much to add, Tony. Thank you.
Okay. You okay, Kevin?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I think that completes the round of questions. I'm reminding everybody it's already 12:15.
Paul?
Yeah.
It's George. I have a question after all.
Oh, all right.
Can someone just update me on the current status? I mean, I know it's not imminent, but the current status of the Cooper Street, Church Street tunnel, since I was interested to see that Cooper Street is fairly high up in your street hierarchy within the precinct plan. So that would suggest to me that the tunnel is more important than it might hitherto have been considered to be. So I'm not quite sure who's the best person to answer that question.
I don't know whether Deanne or someone from the city.
I think Prabir might be better at answering that,
All right.
Paul.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I don't have a good picture on Cooper Street yet.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been put into the city's capital budget, and I'm not exactly sure how or when that will happen. So, our goal with the precinct plan was to get it encoded as a goal for the neighborhood, but no one sort of picked up the mantle and started pushing the implementation side of it. So it's kind of an unanswered question. Maybe it's something we need to bring up with our colleagues at the city, that we try to start planning for its implementation at some point.
Okay. I see Nina Marie's joined us now. So welcome, Nina Marie. We're just finishing off questions. I don't know if you saw the presentation, or do you have any questions you want to ask before we go to comments?
Sorry,
can't hear you. There you are.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have the presentation package and I'm just was able to hear a little bit of what was going on. I think I have just one question, and I apologize if somebody asked it before I could hear. But I'm wondering, this just seems to me there's a number of sustainability issues here in this particular project around the public realm. And I couldn't tell from the renderings. It just seemed very diagrammatic. And maybe that's a question that can be followed up in the comments, but I really would like to know a little bit about the sustainability, what's really happening in those diagrams around the public realm and sustainability options. So maybe that's too broad, but it would just help to hear a little bit about that.
I don't know. Should I go? So thanks for that. I think you picked up on the last question. Sorry.
Yeah, it's the last question. So if you want to give a brief response, and then we'll go to comments. Maybe we'll pick it up there.
So we are just starting this project, and that's top of mind for us as well. Sustainability and making sure that stormwater runoff, like the previously asked question, is being taken care of, integrated with the landscaping solutions. We'll look at means of harvesting that and minimizing the runoff, utilizing the permeable pavers, being mindful of the plant material, the tree species, and so on. So absolutely top of mind. And we'll get to the details of that and how and what type we'll be utilizing in our next session, as soon as we start the design. But we'll definitely keep that top of.
Okay, as I said, it's now 20 after 12, so we're behind. So let's move to comments, try and keep them as focused as possible, and just remind everybody it's just issues ID. So now's the chance to get those issues out. Eric, do you want to kick it off?
Yes. So I think you hear from a lot of the question. I think the question for clarification, the seamless integration between all the pieces, how it all comes together, is one of the critical. Because you're doing some specific pieces here and there, and so having that big picture, the importance of having a good communication and coordination with everyone will be quite critical. So obviously your team, the City of Toronto, and the Waterfront Toronto, and everyone's going to have to work really hard together here. To me, that's one of the absolute critical piece, because it's really a canvas that's being done by multiple player. I think it would be very useful to have a map that does show, though, like who does what. I think kind of an overlay just to clearly say, okay, what does West State do? What is the other, so that we can all kind of get a sense of the kind of how the teamwork come, and because then I think that, which was indicated earlier, that idea of that all the pieces, the continuity between the extension of each of the pieces are quite critical. I think one thing, and it's building on Brigitte point, I think we needed drawings that see all these things comes together. Having like all the existing building footprint, where the loading, especially the ground floor, just to understand how the connection between the existing, the future buildings might be. Because most buildings are actually have some form of proposal, seeing the ground floor, seeing the open space, seeing where the muse, for example. I'm thinking that I know that the corner of the development at the pinnacle at the corner of Yonge Street and by the Toronto Star, the part to the north, I know that there's a proposal. So seeing all of these pieces, these interconnection, how the public realm all comes together, is I think a quite important, because we don't get a sense yet, and I know you're in issue identification, but that's one of the things that I think that when you come back to be able to see how the public realm interact with every proposal, especially where you are doing your intervention. The plaza, I think, are very intrigued. I think it has to be, and that actually understanding, for example, what these buildings, how they relate to their surrounding, is quite critical for your work. The plaza needs to be, so obviously a remarkable piece, but it's also in a very heavy infrastructure zone with the Gardiner, with the Lakeshore. So when you come back understanding about how, what's going to be the use of it, how the different pieces are being integrated, is quite critical. The foot of Yonge Street, I think that's something that I'm always being. I know that you're not fully responsible for it, but again, coordinating how the two works together. And I think that looking at your cross section, I think that one thing that and some of my landscape architects friend will respond to, the maximizing the planting zone, making sure that things can grow, mature, because I see these zones. There will be some cells under, I'm assuming, but things are in like a 1.8 meter. Everything is like very tight, like ensuring the maturity, the biodiversity, integrating the sustainability feature within the public realm. To me, is this is a lot of the role of the leadership role that needs to happen here to make sure that this is come out to be a remarkable streetscape. So anything you do is to support, I think, that very much that the essence of having a mature landscape in the long term. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. I'll go to Nina Marie if you're ready with your comments.
Yes, thank you. And again, these are also from the package as well. So I hope that they're clear and relevant. Thank you. I know that we're at Issues ID, and I have the opportunity to emphasize some of what Eric has just said, but more specifically that this is a real opportunity for leadership around nature-based solutions, around green infrastructure as a capital investment that pays off for the long term, particularly around climate resilience in the public realm. This is our only opportunity to do so in this heavily armatured area. So really, I think it's absolutely critical that we see this come across in your drawings, that they are brought to life as in living color with inspiration for the public realm. And that means specifically cross-sectional diagrams that show us what is going on below the sidewalk in terms of the soil cells, the capacity for regenerative structure for the tree canopy, that maximize, not just optimizing, but maximizing the space for the plantings, as Eric has just mentioned, is critical. But that also means a diversity of the planting plan, not just ornamental street trees that are kind of considered disposable, frankly, by some of what we've seen in the past, but real targets for urban heat island reduction that have numbers attached to them, that have an opportunity for canopy growth, retention of biodiversity, specific species that will actually enhance and strengthen that canopy, and really give back as much space as possible to the public. I'd like to see that personally in terms of permeability factors. How much pavement are we removing? How much permeability are we getting? Opportunities anywhere we can for talking about, as the lead consultant for the, as I understand it, for the public realm here, for coordinating the right-of-ways. We really want to talk about the public realm as an opportunity for green infrastructure and for health benefits for people. I keep emphasizing this, I know, and my colleagues are probably tired of hearing me say it, but we really need an opportunity to connect people to these to the living structures that support us for reasons of health benefits. We know that there are, like no other time in history, we need people outdoors safely moving through this public realm. And finally, the last thing is just please, please, please manage and talk about rain as a resource, not stormwater, but rain as a resource that's managed for its benefit here. I hope that next time you come back, we can really talk more specifically about some of these sustainable priorities. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Top of mind for
Marie.
myself as well. Thanks.
Fatty, are you there? Yep, Fatty, you're muted.
Yep,
there you go.
Just trying to unmute. Sorry. Thank you. I think Eric and Nina Marie really hit on quite a lot of the things that I was thinking about as well. I just think it also goes a little bit closer to some of the questions that Bridget was pointing towards, and the magnitude of the amount of people who are going to be living in this area, plus not to say the tourists that will flock to the foot of Yonge Street, and the people who go to the games and festivals. And, this is a huge, huge opportunity to reconsider the right-of-way along the lines of some of the questions that Pat was mentioning, and the role of these kinds of civic spaces, not just from the really critical and important green infrastructural assets and climate resilience that Nina Marie just mentioned, but the role that they could play for civic and kind of cultural engagement of the citizens and tourists of the city in a precinct that is so huge and so critical for the long-term success of our downtown core. So, you know, in some ways too, I think that the slide deck does you a little bit of a disfavor, and I hate to be the one commenting on representation and visualizations, but I found it really hard to kind of follow through with the sort of ethos of what your direction is for the project in a way, because so many of the drawings were extremely diagrammatic. And I know, again, this is issues ID, but when I see a cross section that is all gray, even if it's still in the earliest stages of it, it gives me the kind of it gives the kind of a feel that there's still circulation of vehicles, and the kind of movement of traffic is the priority here in the public realm, because there's such normative sections that point to the sort of efficiency of circulation rather than the kind of cultural and ecological contributions the public right of way could make. So in like the simplest term, you know, some of the inspiration images, which are really beautiful and exciting, can also include a set of inspirational images that speak to some of the projects that are super innovative all around the world, precedents that are speaking to the role of green infrastructure and the nexus of green infrastructure with civic and cultural assets as well, and kind of really put that on the foreground as inspiration as well. And last but not least, I would just mention something about the idea of the sort of a series of diagrams that could potentially also talk about the capacity of seasonal and different programming. You know, is the idea of how might this be used and accessed in the summer versus in peak summer when there's probably tons of pedestrians out there, versus thermal comfort and other times of the year with solar, with the side of the sidewalk that might get maximum solar exposure versus others that might be in more windy, uninhabitable and unhospitable 90-story towers nearby. So, you know, there's a lot of these elements that are a lot more about the experience of the road and the right-of-way that kind of could really help push the agenda of what the public realm could be doing in an area like this, on top of all the really critical things that I think should be the priority that Nina Marie and Eric have already mentioned as well. But I think it's a really exciting and an important part of the city, and we just want to see its success elevated to the highest possible standard. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Fatty.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll go to Betsy.
Hi, thanks, Paul. So agreeing with a bold, cohesive idea as kind of underline all of these comments, I want to focus on Yonge in particular. So all of these streets are important, but Yonge has a really special place in connecting the downtown to the waterfront, and it really is a pretty mean street. The development that is north of your area is not it's not going well from a pedestrian and cycling friendly point of view. So I'd love to see a really strong idea for Yonge with really well designed, fully separated bike lanes, additional planting, lay-by areas for taxis and Ubers, bike racks, and an understanding of how the development of this lower part of Yonge can inform the ambitions for north of Front Street. Because this could set a standard that essentially needs to be taken up through the city. And I think that your position on this part of the street is going to be really important. I know you need to understand the city guidelines, but you still need to move forward in terms of design excellence and produce a really strong vision that pushes a robust environmental and pedestrian and cycling vision. It needs to be a street that responds to density, that can accept and merge with the waterfront vision as you get towards the foot of Yonge and where it kind of transitions into Queens Quay. In particular, the section of the railway corridor and railway to front, which is a really large blank spot that's detrimental to a landscape-based connection between the northern part of your area and the waterfront area because of how dark and tight the street is as planned. Look to some of the other ideas that have been proposed in underpass areas that we've reviewed already as a committee, and actually try to do better than they're doing. I think that there's, just because another firm has done something and has gone through the committee doesn't mean that that idea is baked in and can't be improved upon. And I 100% agree with Fatty that, especially in this area, reconsidering the right of way and being really inventive with how you deal with these kind of dark and tight spots of Yonge may need to mean that you reconsider how traffic flows and the amount of space that's given to traffic. Otherwise, you're always going to have this blank blind spot in the middle of what could be a very beautiful and robust pedestrian and oriented streetscape. So that's what I'm going to be looking for next time you come.
Thanks, Betsy. George?
Okay, thanks, Paul. My comments are mostly follow-up to Bridget and Eric about coordination. But I want to be more specific about exactly how this project comes back to the design review panel. As the presentation went along, it became apparent to me that in many respects, the scope of work that this particular project team has is, sharply delimited. It excludes lots of important adjacent conditions. They're not disputing that. It's just a contractual circumstance. But as Bridget has pointed out, if we have to see the project conceptually only within the scope of work of this design team, we can't assess it properly. So Eric called for coordination, but I want more than coordination. I think actually for future presentations to the design review panel, as part of the presentation, the appropriate city people or the appropriate Waterfront Toronto people need to show us the current state of design work in all these adjacent areas so that we can actually see what's proposed together with what's proposed by this team within the area, which is within their scope of work. So that includes West 8's work on Lakeshore east of Jarvis. It includes NAC and Pinnacle's work at the Yonge and Lakeshore corner. I don't know who's doing it, but includes the work at the foot of Yonge Street to do with the new entrance into the hotel. We actually need to, and the park in the Menkes project that Bridget mentioned. I'm not saying that all of them will be very far along, but we need to see the current state of design, whatever that is, together with the work that this team is presenting, or else we're not going to be able to assess the work that this team is presenting properly. So it suggests a kind of, new format for a presentation where the context presentation for the presentation by the project team is much more elaborate than it normally is in relation to what the project team itself presents. But I think it's the only way this thing can go, because their scope is so narrowly defined in relation to the large number of issues which are adjacent. It's the only workable way to proceed.
Right. Thank you, George. Peter?
I don't have much to say. I would just like to reinforce Betsy's comment about Lower Yonge and the further work that needs to be done on enhancing that environment. Largely agree with the other comments that I've heard. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Bridget?
Yeah, I mean, to learn that there are about 35,000 people in a few blocks, as well as all the people coming to Waterfront from the rest of the city, it just puts a huge amount of pressure on the public realm. And you're not talking buildings, you're talking 90-story buildings. So it's a kind of a whole new typology within our urban realm. I feel the fact that we're actually just looking at the public realm now, when we've already seen the Pinnacle project and the park, it's like you guys are lagging behind. It's not your fault. It's just the way the contracts were issued. And there's a huge amount of catch up to do. If I were to describe the three qualities of Waterfront Toronto, it's leading by landscape, integration of public realm, and the continuity of the public realm. So if I use those as my kind of 3 points, I would say the fact that the park is so far in the distance, it's kind of the opposite. All of these other parts came first and development came after. So in a way, for me, that's a huge issue that is so contrary to the way that this whole waterfront, under the guidance of Waterfront Toronto, has evolved. I would love to see that entire block that is the park considered a temporary project. Maybe it's a temporary public art project. It's going to sit there as a blank piece of dirt for how many years? And the idea that we could actually turn it into a kind of projection of a future of this hugely dense neighborhood and treat it as a kind of project, an art project. So you need to get Menke's, you need Waterfront Toronto, the City of Toronto, city parks to the table. And maybe it's just a temporary competition for a temporary installation. But how amazing would that be that as the buildings are evolving, there is actually at least a temporary role for this park that is actually precedes the final park, which could be, I don't know how long. So we don't know that time frame, but here's a piece of land in an area that has at least 35,000 people, and why not make it into an installation that actually has a kind of positive role to play as the neighborhood is evolving. I feel that the work that West 8 has done, that we've seen over many presentations, focuses on the north-south continuity, how to cross under the Gardiner, the use of color and lighting. The fact that you're not having a conversation with those guys and actually benefiting from it and moving beyond that is kind of like, for me, something that has to happen. It's just not even it's not negotiable. It just has to happen because there's so much effort and energy that's gone into it. And all we want to do is build, because if we want continuity of the public realm, it's not about me being able to recognize west of Jarvis or east of Jarvis. That is a kind of stupid line that doesn't mean anything if I'm part of the public realm. So that for me, kind of that dialogue has to be unlocked. And all the players are here and they all talk to each other, but they need to be talking about these specific issues as it is pertinent to this public realm, not just in generalities, but in specifics. And I think that's just crucial. And I don't even think you can come back without telling us that that's already happened. Then I would say there was one slide really early on about mid-block connections in this precinct. This is so part of what's happening through all these projects of Waterfront Toronto, different developers, different architects, is there's an emerging public realm. And that these mid-block connections are really interesting. So east of Jarvis, we have multiple projects with a mid-block connection that is actually part of a sequence of these new kind of private public spaces. They're kind of in between. And I would like to see this as part of this public realm study to be reinforced, enhanced, and understood as something to be valued. And it's a connection west of Jarvis to east of Jarvis that I think it was like one slide. I don't want it underplayed. I want it understood. And how is this report and your work supporting something that is already part of the new DNA of the emerging public realm of Waterfront Toronto? And then so I think that's, for me, really essential. And I think that, again, this continuity of public realm, I would imagine that in your study, every adjacent street to the park and what its public realm is needs to project the future park. It's almost like you almost need to project what it's going to be before it's there so that you can be supporting it, or there's some kind of dialogue about what will happen in the future relative to your streetscape that will be a crucial extension of that new piece of the public realm. Thanks so much.
Okay, thanks, Bridget. I think we have Pat and Kevin left. Pat?
I don't have anything to add. I think that was interesting comments from all of my colleagues. Thanks.
Okay. Kevin?
Thank you. You know, my obsession would obviously be green infrastructure. It's been very well articulated, the potential for this system to really help the city manage water. So I think Fadi mentioned that even in issues identification, I think it would be really interesting, fun, and I think quite critical that below the surface is seen as a potential. What's the potential for what could be a huge reservoir, or you know, could we put metrics to the entire system? You know, flow control, basic treatment. Speaking as an architect, water management is becoming, very critical and very difficult to do on these dense urban sites. Is there any way in which this infrastructure can actually help buildings manage their water? So not only can it, manage the runoff created by all these hardscapes, can they actually be a potential resource for all these buildings, these, amazing buildings are going to get constructed for how they manage these very serious peak events. So I would, as part of that, right now, kind of generic below grade condition, what is the space for this green infrastructure? Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for all the comments. I'll summarize those comments. And since it's issues ID, of course, there's no vote. I think there's a number of constructive comments and suggestions that have been made. And I think I'll just start with the reality of we've got a lot of moving pieces here. We've got probably within that study area over the next 10 years, an unbelievable amount of public and private investment. And we're dealing with, by and large, the foot of Yonge Street and the future of where Yonge meets the water and the related environment. And I think it always has been a special place, but this is an opportunity to really capitalize on the absolute need for the public realm to not only match but to surpass what we have ever experienced in the past. And I think that one of the messages I'm hearing is not more of the same. Be bold, think big, think long term. This is 10 plus years out when all these projects are going to come into reality. So a couple of suggestions I think were perhaps quite helpful. Since we're really building a new piece of city here that's going to be there for a hell of a long time. First, the theme of integration, coordination of all the pieces of the big picture. I also had similar reactions when I looked at the slide deck, and I thought, yeah, there's a lot of things that have happened prior to this, but I'd love to see a map that sets out that total context, that shows where the new buildings are going to go, even at their current state of design, what the public realm thinking is at this point in time, who does what, as someone referred to. I think it would be a very powerful map, and we should have that map as a constant reference point as we go through this process. So we can say, yeah, okay, now I get it. That relates to this, and this will work because, or it won't because, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really a map that shows the future to the best of our ability that reflects the current state of design. And I think that'll be a very valuable tool. The second theme I think that came out is an opportunity here to push sustainability in every way possible. Suggestions about, of course, the unique opportunity for green infrastructure that will inspire the public and the visitors and the people that are going to live there, and will be functional and will reflect landscape biodiversity. Not more of the same again. The comment about managing rain as a resource, all of these considerations need to be pulled together and integrated in a very strong way. And I don't know, I'm just maybe reading between the lines here, but I'm sensing that perhaps this is, if not now, then when, an opportunity for radical green transformation. Maybe considering the development, the 35,000 plus that's going to be a reality down here. Are we missing an opportunity, to really take one of these streets, whatever it is, or maybe more, and really minimize the vehicular traffic function and maximize the pedestrian, the green infrastructure? So I would open your mind up to that. That may or may not be within the scope, but I think now is the time to have that discussion. It may not lead to anywhere, but I think it's very, very important. The scale of the intensification, I think, is something, again, to keep in mind. Never mind the 90-story Pinnacle towers and the other towers that are 70 and 60 and 50 and all the rest of it. At our next meeting in December, I believe we're going to have 11 Bay Street there, the convention center site, which is 54 stories plus, plus, plus. And we're going to, I'm sure, get into the Ejaculation Ferry Terminal redevelopment and how that might come into fruition. And we're going to be integrating all this with the reconfiguration of the LRT down Bay Street from Union Station down to the waterfront, the new portal on Queens Quay. There's so much stuff on a public and private sector basis that's going to happen here, and it's all got to come together and really work. And really, at the end of the day, 10 plus years from now, say, God, we did a great job. This is fantastic. It's unique. It's special. It'll stand the test of time, as opposed to missed opportunity. So I think that's in the vein in which the comments that I've heard them anyway have been made. And I think not only the livability of the area, remember this study area goes all the way from York Street to Jarvis and the Queens Quay all the way up the front. It's huge. I'm willing to bet there's a hell of a lot more than 35,000 people that are going to be living and working in that area. And then add into that all the visitors coming to the waterfront on the transit and going to the Jack Layton Ferry Terminal. You could have, hundreds of thousands of people in this area. And, I think we don't want to be timid with this. We've really got to be bold and really take our hats off and think big and try with all our capabilities and skills to integrate all of this activity and all this thinking. So those are the kinds of things that I've heard from the panel, and I think it would be really, really exciting, frankly, and positive for you when you come back to the panel to have that so-called I'll call it a master plan of current state of design and infrastructure and public realm as our common reference point, because I think it would really help us and it would help you as we want to make this a very, very positive, undertaking and a positive experience that's gonna really put all of us to the test. So I could say more, but I think that sort of tries to capture where we are at this point, and I respect the fact that it's Issues ID, and I really appreciate that opportunity that you've given us to bring these issues to the forefront. So there's no vote, but we will give the proponent an opportunity for a response at this point in time before we conclude. So I don't know, Cindy, if you want to lead off or not.
I think I'm the last one. Jim unfortunately had to leave early and probably is still on the line at Waterfront Toronto. So from my perspective, this is absolutely in line with what I was hoping to hear from you, just to give me that additional support, if you will, as I'm approaching the redesign with my transportation and engineering team. So top of mind for myself. Really happy to hear the comments and your support. And, I wish we had more public realm and more streetscape to look at than just Yonge, Harbor, and Lakeshore. That's the main focus for us, but happy to consider other areas. To Bridget's point, we're unfortunately not looking at the areas east of Yonge Street except for Lakeshore. However, whatever we're doing and proposing here will definitely have an impact on what's happening on the adjacent streets as well, if not else, at the minimum at the intersection level. So happy to bring forward the next time we meet and demonstrate how we're going to take these further. I'm actually glad that the cross sections that I put forward were just left as they were in the EA, because we're going to demonstrate next time how we're planning to implement to improve on those and to take them to the next level. So thank you for that. I don't know, Prabir or anyone from Waterfront or Nader, if you guys want to add anything to this.
This is Prabir. Just wanted to echo with you. Definitely thanks a lot for all of those valuable comments. And definitely we are working in line with the other close by projects, namely Lakeshore Boulevard, that West 8 public realm component. So yeah, no, I don't have anything to add, just to say that yes, we will be coordinating with all of the close by projects, and next time we'll try to cover as much as possible in line with the other projects what we are doing. And sorry for the background, it's my little one.
That's okay. Somebody's got the last word there. Okay, thank you very much again. And I just want to emphasize to wrap it up that, you know, we really appreciate this opportunity. We're here to help. We want to be positive. We want to do this together, and we want to move forward together and be, you know, create a very, very unique and special environment. And I think we can all do it because we all want to go there. So thanks again.
Really appreciate it as well. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay. Okay, I guess that wraps up the public session. So I think we can, Leon, formally adjourn this session. We're over in time, and we'll take a little break and go back into camera for a brief few minutes, I believe.